Chapter 44. Wuxia was indeed very thin. He wasn't short and he didn't have much meat on his body. Even though Wuxia was wearing loose clothes, Jiang Pingji was very good at judging a person's gender, height, weight and measurements based on the size of his feet, the depth of his footprints, the frequency of his breathing and the facial features. She could roughly determine a person's gender, height, weight and measurements, let alone someone like Wuxia. Jiang Pingji said discontentedly, "Father is much thinner than before. When we return home this time we have to take good care of the flesh." Wuxia's eyes were filled with surprise. He was so excited that he couldn't even speak properly. His hands were trembling on his knees as if he didn't know where to put them. Lanting, do you still have your childhood memories? Do you remember how I used to look like?" After the death of Lu Lanting's twin brother, her birth mother also died of a serious illness. Wuxia, who was deeply affected, had to leave Hejian County for some reason. His new post was far from here and it was very dangerous. Out of consideration he did not bring Lu Lanting with him. He had only returned home twice in the past few years. To be precise, this father and son had not seen each other for many years. Jiang Pingji shook her head and said, "The clothes you're wearing are old but they're too big to fit you now. Aren't you losing weight?" "So that's how it is." The excitement on Wuxia's face subsided, but when he thought about how his daughter had been so observant, it was obvious that she had taken a liking to him. He felt much better when he thought about it and said gently, "Your mother doesn't like needlework. She's been married to me for many years, but she's only done a few sets." As expected, it seemed that this cheap father had deep feelings for the cheap mother that he had never met before. However, when she thought of the situation in the inner courtyard, she kicked this thought out of her mind. Men from the ancient times had different values from her own. "Father, will you be staying at home for a long time this time?" Jiang Pingji could tell that Wuxia's physical condition was not very good. Aside from the depression in his heart, most of it was due to overwork. Based on the trend, it was not impossible for him to die from overwork. Therefore she preferred to strike a balance between work and rest. Even though Jiang Pingji could not treat Lu Lanting as her father, she was still borrowing Lu Lanting's body. Jiang Pingji could at least show some concern for Lu Lanting, but it was up to Lu Lanting if he wanted to listen to her. In Wuxia's ears, his heart softened as if he was a careful daughter who couldn't bear to see him leave. "This time I have some matters to deal with. I should be staying here for about 3 months. After I'm done with everything I'll go to Shangjing. If everything goes smoothly I'll have nothing to worry about and be a rich man at home." Wuxia's answer was completely out of Jiang Pingji's expectations. Was he going to retire? "Father, you're still so young. You've just reached the age of 30. Why are you retiring?" In that era there was no precise retirement age for officials. Most of them worked until they could no longer work. Wuxia was still young, only in his early 30s. His career was on the rise and there was still room for him to show off. Wuxia thought for a moment, then touched his head. The official family doesn't care about the dissuasion of the scholars and Confucian scholars, and doesn't listen to the advice of the hundreds of officials. They insist on negotiating with the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. If this continues, I'm afraid there will be a great disaster. It's better to escape as soon as possible while it's still early. My wish in life is to live a carefree life and protect you as you grow up. However, the current situation is unforgiving. In comparison, the internal strife and intrigue in the officialdom is really boring. Lanting is almost an adult and I want to spend more time with you." He smiled bitterly. How could his daughter understand such things? "Father, are you worried that after the negotiation the emperor will be afraid of the Count of Zhenbei and will cut off his own arms?" Jiang Pingji's words shocked Wuxia. He did not expect his daughter to be so knowledgeable. On second thought, although his daughter was a girl, she had been raised as a man since she was young. She was also his and Ah Min's daughter, so she was not stupid. What's more, his daughter had an extraordinary background. Indeed, the 3 tribes of the northern borderline are ambitious and have coveted Dongqing for many years. The emperor has been neglecting the court affairs and is no longer as wise and decisive as he was when he was young. Refusing to negotiate, the emperor still has to rely on the Count of Zhenbei. However, the emperor has long been dissatisfied with the Count of Zhenbei and always wants to take over the military power. If the negotiation is successful, it will be time to kill the donkey after it's no longer useful. Wuxia shook his head. It was not that there were no people who could see the hidden dangers, but the emperor was biased and stubborn. Even a few bulls could not pull him back. Speaking of this, Lu Shi sneered and said sarcastically, "They are not upright. No wonder they are afraid of the Count of Zhenbei." The royal family of Dongqing was originally a fugitive slave. Later they worked as a groom for a famous general of the previous dynasty. By chance they were favored and slowly rose to power. However, a dog cannot change its spots. Their ancestor became a rebel for a temporary benefit. Chapter 45. Putting aside her prejudices, Jiang Pingji realized that she seemed to have picked up a rather different kind of father. "Your handwriting is much better than your mother's. It should be more like mine." As the head of a feudal family, no matter how different Lu Shi was, teaching, testing and checking on his work were all part of the process of fostering the bond between father and son. He glanced at Jiang Pingji's handwriting and his facial muscles twitched. He reluctantly praised, "It's pretty good." Jiang Pingji was speechless. It was clearly written, yet he was praising her for drawing well. To put it bluntly, he was indirectly criticizing her for not writing well. Jiang Pingji wanted to find an excuse to avoid it, but her eyes lit up when she saw Lu Shi grind the brush and write. Even if she couldn't tell what it was, she thought it looked good. Jiang Pingji's eyes lit up when she saw Lu Shi's writing. As a matter of fact, Lu Shi's handwriting was also famous in Hejian County. It was clear and smooth, full of meaning. The characters were strong and the meaning of each word was in harmony with the spirit. Now that he had been an official for many years, his state of mind was not as rash as it was when he was young. His handwriting was more gentle and elegant. Looking at calligraphy is like looking at a person. A good handwriting is far more attractive than a beautiful essay. Lu Shi put down his brush and wrote the words Lu Shi on the bamboo paper. Comparing it with Jiang Pingji's own handwriting, it was obvious who was better. Jiang Pingji carefully observed the difference between the two. All kinds of information emerged in her mind. She was also analyzing Lu Shi's posture and strength. But before she could finish her analysis, Lu Shi, who seemed to be a very serious feudal patriarch, added, "After all, when sending a letter to a lady, they usually look at the words first before reading the sentimental content." Jiang Pingji coughed. Lu Shi smiled and squinted his eyes. He was satisfied with his son's reaction. "What's there to be surprised about? Back then, Amin always mocked me for my bad handwriting, saying that it was like a dog crawling on the ground. No matter how good the content was, the impression would be reduced. If we didn't know each other, she wouldn't even want to see it." De Zhuangzhu Furen, the host's mother, taught her well. She is a feudal patriarch who is at the forefront of the times. 233333 Zizai Mainan. Although the style doesn't feel right and a feudal parent should be serious in speech and manner and ask for domestic discipline at the drop of a hat. But, this kind of streamer papa is really cute. Privately discussing with his adolescent son about the essentials of writing love letters, */w***, Lan Chue Yu Buja. But the host is a girl. I'm confused. Tudu Feichio. I'll say it again, when it comes to picking up girls, I only admire the streamer. Jiang Pingji relaxed a little when she saw him like that. So, this is the motivation for father to learn calligraphy? Lu Shi said righteously, "The result is that I can write well, but no one knows why. They can only see the result." Then Lu Shi asked Jiang Pingji what books she had been reading recently and what her thoughts were. He wanted to know about his sons' or daughters' hobbies. "I copied the Analects of Confucius yesterday, but I didn't like it. Instead, I thought the military strategies in the study was more interesting." Lu Shi agreed. "I don't like it either. It's easy to wear it out. You're still young, so you should just read a little to pass the time. You don't have to read too deeply. When you're older, you'll have your own ideas and experience. Then you can study it again." Jiang Pingji could not help but secretly sigh that her legendary mother had taught her well. The Analects of Confucius was a classic of Confucianism and the leader of literature in that era. After the unification of the previous dynasty, Confucianism became the orthodox school of thought. After hundreds of years of chaos, other schools gradually rose. It was not until the 5 countries were divided into Xia that 100 schools of thought contended. Even then, Confucianism was still respected as the orthodox school of thought, and no one could challenge its position. Lu Shi was a high-ranking official in Dongqing, and he was considered the orthodox school of Confucianism. He was going all out to talk to his son, like that in private. If Jiang Pingji was an indigenous person and met such a father, it would indeed leave a very deep first impression. Lu Lanting's studies were not outstanding. Jiang Pingji relied on her memory and the results were obvious. She could answer Feng Jin's questions during the day, but when it came to Lu Shi her knowledge was not enough. Lanky Yubus, this is tragic. I can already see the streamer getting scolded by the feudal elders. A group of viewers squatted down to watch the stream. They wanted to see Jiang Pingji get scolded by Lu Shi, but they were all disappointed. Jiang Pingji felt guilty and depressed. I've let you down, father. Lu Shi was not disappointed. Compared to the number of books she had read and the number of articles she had memorized, he was more interested in her aura. Who could not read from a book? It was rare for her to have her own ideas instead of following the crowd and being a yes man. Not bad. At least you're not stupid. He rubbed the top of her head lovingly. You can make up for your studies slowly. There's no rush. In fact, Lu Shi used to be a naughty child who could not read well. He could read all the words but he could not put them into his head. Every time his teacher or his father tested him, his mind would be in a mess. He would have many ideas but he could not express them. He had suffered enough and he did not want his son to repeat the same mistake. What's the point of writing a good policy or political commentary? As a parent, the most important thing is to govern. No matter how much you learn, it's all for this purpose. If you focus on studying and writing, you'll neglect other things. Isn't that putting the cart before the horse? Jiang Pingji had to admit that Lu Shi's words were like a non-mainstream feudal patriarch. Just by looking at the bullet screen of the live broadcast, one would know that Lu Shi's speech had immediately captured many fans. After a while, Lu Shi saw that the sky had completely darkened. He could not help but feel a little regretful. It's getting late. Lanting, go back and rest. Come with me to the Xianxia temple tomorrow morning. The Xianxia temple. Jiang Pingji was puzzled. Don't we have to go to the family school? Of course not. The family school is not bad, but it's a bad atmosphere. It's easy to learn bad things. It's better for me to teach you personally. Lu Shi said, after your second brother passed away, Min dragged her sick body to the Xianxia temple to pray for you to pass the evil tribulation at the age of 12. Now that the tribulation has passed, it's only natural for me to fulfill your mother's wish and let Master Liaochen take a look at you. Jiang Pingji's heart skipped a beat. The evil tribulation at the age of 12. Are you referring to the bandits? Yes, I think so. Lu Shi's eyes were a little gloomy when he said that. Father, you already know? Jiang Pingji thought it would be fine if the second lady saw through it. After all, she was an acquaintance. But Lu Shi had not been home for many years. He had only met his daughter once or twice when she was a child. How could she know? Was it because of the so-called blood relationship? Lu Shi patted her head again. Don't worry. I've known about it before you were born and I've prepared for it. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Why does it feel like we're not on the same wavelength? Chapter 46. Xianxia Temple was located on a high mountain in Hejian County. From the foot of the mountain to the temple, there were a total of 999 steps made of green bricks. They curved all the way to the top of the mountain. Along the way there were pilgrims in twos and threes. They carried bamboo baskets with incense, candles and other items in them. Jiang Pingji didn't believe in Buddha, but she had to admit that the scenery from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain was full of zen. The stream was murmuring and ancient trees were towering. She could vaguely hear the melodious sound of bells and the peaceful chanting of Buddhist scriptures in the distance. The sky turned from dark to bright. The mountains in the distance were shrouded in the red glow of the morning sun. Accompanied by the calming sound of Buddha, they welcomed the arrival of a new day. Even Jiang Pingji, who disdained Buddha, felt a lot more open-minded at that moment. The sound of wooden clogs landing on the stone floor rang out, one step after another, each step carrying a leisurely charm. Lu Shi wore a brand new dark green robe. The size was much better than the clothes he wore the day before. It also showed how thin he was. His black hair was meticulously arranged and his face was trimmed clean. He looked refreshed and his fingernails and toenails were meticulously trimmed. There was even a hint of sandalwood fragrance on his body. His face was solemn, which showed how much he valued this vow. Jiang Pingji held a food box in her hand. It contained incense, candles, lamp oil, gold paper, and fruits for the ceremony. Of course, she secretly weighed the box. The weight did not match the real thing. There might be real money in it. Love go little Sage Netku. When your two elder brothers passed away due to illness, Min had worshipped her way up to the Buddhist temple step by step, begging Buddha for mercy. Although he maintained a leisurely pace and breathing rate, Luxi's body was not strong. He had only climbed a third of the way and his forehead was already sweating. He had taken medicine the day before. Although his fever had subsided in the middle of the night, his body was still weak. Even his lips were pale. Didn't father say that mother's health is not good? Why did she do it? What's the use of praying to Buddha instead of seeking medical help when she's sick? Jiang Pingji didn't understand. According to her guess, her mother didn't seem like a person who believed in gods or Buddha. That's right. Getting sick is the job of the doctors. What's the use of praying to the gods and Buddha? If all the gods and Buddhas were useful, how could your two brothers have died? Min also scoffs at gods and Buddhas, but sometimes when there is no other way out, not to mention gods and Buddhas, even a swindler can be a straw to save the people. Hope is firmly grasped in our hands. Luxi sighed as he walked, as if he was recalling something. In the end, he couldn't save the child's life. The continuous blows had taken half his wife's life. Didn't that mean he was also taking his life? Since he couldn't persuade her, what else could he do besides accompanying her and fooling around? He hated himself for not being a doctor, for not being able to cure the illness and save the life. Fortunately, you are still alive. Today I have come to fulfill my wish. I hope that your mother and brother can see you and protect your future happiness. Jiang Pingji held the food box in silence. She was not Lu Lanting. Father, you know very well that I'm not. Oh, you are the daughter that Min wants. Don't let your imagination run wild. Luxi seemed to have a habit of patting her head. Since he had taken 2 more steps, it was not difficult for him to do so. She will only be completely at ease in the other world if you live a good life. Jiang Pingji didn't understand. She looked at Luxi's slightly thin back, feeling that there was another layer of meaning in his words. Luxi took Jiang Pingji and the old housekeeper to Xianxia temple before the sun rose. The long climb up the mountain made their legs ache. Finally, they reached the top of the mountain when the sun was high up in the sky. They saw the temple hidden in the lush forest. The temple was surrounded by lush green books. Layers of fresh flowers and plants clustered around the fading walls of the courtyard. The greenish-gray roof of the temple showed a youthful charm under the sunlight. The ancient trees were bathed in the morning light. They could hear the deep ringing of bells and the chirping of birds. The area of Xianxia temple was not large, but the age of its construction made it look like an old man standing on the top of the mountain, watching the changes of the world day after day. Xianxia temple was built before the 16 Kingdoms War. At that time, Buddhist temples flourished and there were countless temples. Luxi gave a brief introduction of Xianxia temple and led Jiang Pingji into the main hall. He bowed to a middle-aged monk and asked, "Is Master Liaochen here? The master is waiting for you in the meditation room in the side hall. Please follow me." The monk in the gray robe bowed back as if he had expected it. He looked humble and pious. Jiang Pingji observed the surroundings out of boredom. There were already many worshippers in the main hall. There were men and women, young and old. They added some liveliness to the old temple. As she was thinking, she heard Luxi calling her name. After passing through a corridor, Jiang Pingji followed Luxi to a meditation room. Before she stepped in, she heard a conversation between Luxi and an old monk. "It's been 7 years. How have you been, Master Lu?" Luxi responded calmly, "Everything is fine. Master Lu, you still have resentment in your heart. It's hard for you to be well." Jiang Pingji laughed in her heart. The old monk's words made her feel like he deserved a beating. Luxi's voice was filled with resentment. "Since Master Liaochen already knows, why ask? This must be the beloved daughter of Benefactor Lu and Benefactor Gu, right?" When the old monk saw Jiang Pingji enter, he raised his head and glanced at her. Then he quickly lowered his head again. The speed at which he twirled the prayer beads in his hand increased. Good. Why have you come to the peaceful place of Buddhism?" Jiang Pingji was baffled. She felt a slight chill in her heart. It was as if someone had seen through her. She was very unhappy. Because the stream started earlier, it took a while for the audience to come in. Someone could not help but post a bullet screen when they saw the scene. Feiqiu Chiu Huoyo. Host, let me tell you something. Whenever you travel through time there must be a strange monk. Jiang Pingji secretly raised her eyebrows. Even though she did not know what the law of time travel was, the monk in front of her was indeed strange. Of course, I followed my father here to fulfill my vow. Otherwise, why would I spend so much effort to climb the mountain and not sleep in my bed? Why would I come here? Jiang Pingji was baffled, but she still followed the advice and sat down on the cushion beside Lu Shi. Her words were considered disrespectful, but the old monk in front of her did not show any anger. Instead he smiled kindly. Ziwei destroys the army. The Emperor's aura is faintly discernible. Too much is as bad as not enough. The old monk said calmly, when you stepped into this humble temple, your blood pressure caused the Buddha's aura to fluctuate. If it were not for the stone steps in the temple, I'm afraid. Chapter 47. What the hell? Jiang Pingji's face was full of questions. Were people from ancient times so unreasonable? They said specious things the moment they met? Of course, the originally quiet live broadcast room had exploded. Many of the viewers who were watching the live broadcast expressed that the message contained a lot of information. Jingming, my male god. No? Was the old monk hinting that the streamer has the luck of an emperor? Shui by Xen Feiyong. The way I open the streaming room today is not right. Isn't this a streaming room for palace intrigue? Yida. Oh my, the ending of palace intrigue is the death of the emperor and becoming the emperor himself? The emperor's version of empresses in the palace? Nongfu Shangquan Yudiangshuan. Bullshit. If the streamer goes to palace intrigue, is that still palace intrigue? It's a palace intrigue version of gluttonous snakes. Jiang Pingji's eyes twitched. What the hell was the emperor's version of empresses in the palace? She knew about gluttonous snakes, but what did palace intrigue mean? At that moment, a little angel who was watching the streaming live demonstrated what palace intrigue version of gluttonous snakes was. Kulele Yile. Congratulations to the streamer for eating Beauty XX, level up +1. Congratulations to the streamer for eating Beauty XX, level up +2. Congratulations to the streamer for eating Concubines XX, level up +3. Congratulations to the streamer for eating Concubines XX, Royal Concubines XX, Empresses XX, level up plus. Jiang Pingji. Lu Shi did not know that Jiang Pingji was distracted. His handsome face was full of anger. Master Liaochen, did you say? The old monk Liaochen made a Buddhist greeting and chanted, that was then and this is now. The young lady is not an ordinary person. Saying it will be beneficial for her to prevent her from going astray in the future. Love go small Signetka Master Lu cares about your beloved daughter and can't bear for her life to be full of misfortune. Just let nature take its course. Jiang Pingji stopped making question marks. She did not care about etiquette and interrupted the guessing game between the two. I wonder if Father and Master Liaochen can answer my question. What is the Emperor's aura? What does it mean? Lu Shi nodded expressionlessly. The monk Liaochen smiled kindly and exposed Jiang Pingji's facade. Young benefactor has a lofty character, an explosive temperament and a lofty aspiration. How could you be willing to submit to others? Under Lu Shi's stare, the old monk leisurely twirled his Buddhist beads and said unhurriedly, young almsgiver, do you agree? Jiang Pingji was speechless. How was he an otherworldly monk? Which of the other monks didn't persuade people to lay down their butcher's knife and become a Buddha? He seemed to be encouraging her to raise her butcher knife boldly. If Lu Shi was the leader of a feudalistic family, then this monk was the non-mainstream of Buddhism. People from ancient times were really hard to communicate with. Jiang Pingji was about to answer, but the old monk suddenly said to Lu Shi, I have something to say to you. I'm afraid it's not suitable for you to hear. The reincarnation tablets of your wife and 2 young masters are enshrined in the side hall. Lu Shi hesitated for a while, but in the end he got up with a cold face. Before he left, he patted Jiang Pingji's head as if to comfort her. After making sure that Lu Shi was far away and that there was no one else around, Jiang Pingji finally frowned impatiently. The smile on the old monk's face became much gentler. About 29 years ago I met your mother. She was only this young. Jiang Pingji was even more curious about her mother. She could not help but ask, you met her? Yes. She wanted to erect a reincarnation tablet for a little girl. The girl's name was Gu Min, Jiang Pingji almost crushed the cup of tea that the old monk had brewed for her because Lu Lanting's mother's name was Gu Min. Master, are you seeing things? Did you remember the wrong name? Who would erect a reincarnation tablet for themselves at such a young age? Jiang Pingji said calmly while secretly observing the old monk's expression. She did not want to miss out on any trace of abnormality. That benefactor was not an ordinary person. Her soul showed signs of leaving her body and her body was filled with yin energy. The old monk seemed to be talking about daily life as if he was reminiscing about the past. Moreover, that girl died in early June. She looked like she was dead but she was still alive at that time. Jiang Pingji felt that the meditation room was indescribably gloomy. The old monk had seen through her. The old monk rambled on. She heard about my humble reputation, so she knelt down and kowtowed to me, hoping to find a chance of survival. I should not have saved her. After all, seizing a body is a sinister act. However, she was destined to be blessed and she sincerely begged me. Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes and said with certainty, "They say that monks do not lie. Why did you lie to me?" The old monk's expression froze. He looked at Jiang Pingji for a long time and suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. "Young benefactor, you are making things difficult for me. I just don't believe that there is such a good thing. How can a person's life be extended so easily? If that was the case, those emperors who were afraid of death would have ascended a long time ago. I believe that you took advantage of the situation to do her a favor." Jiang Pingji grinned, revealing a row of white teeth. "Maybe that girl didn't deserve to die. He just died for some reason. It was fate that my mother ended up in her body. Why don't you just push the boat with the current and do her a favor by expelling the yin energy from her body?" She thought that the old monk would fly into a rage, but he shamelessly nodded and admitted to it. "Young benefactor, you are indeed smart. Everything has its cause and effect. Fate has its own destiny. The girl should have died and your mother should have appeared. Just like you, young benefactor, she should have become Lu Lanting." After the old monk finished speaking, he twirled his Buddhist beads and kept on muttering. At that moment, the system, which had been silent for a long time, secretly said, "I feel like this old monk is spouting a bunch of nonsense." Jiang Pingji said meaningfully, "Maybe it's not nonsense. He just wants to pass on some important information to me." System, what information? I don't know. The brains of people in ancient times are too complicated. They are not on the same channel. I don't understand, Jiang Pingji complained. The system said. Then what are you trying to say? Jiang Pingji rubbed the space between her eyebrows and asked a straightforward question. "I don't want to know about the past. I just want to know how you and my cheap mother worked together to deceive my cheap father and my cheap stepmother. They knew that their bodies were the same but their souls were different. Based on their current thinking, wouldn't they treat me like a demon, cut me into pieces and burn me? Did they think she was stupid? Did the second lady and her father think that she did not know about this secret?" Jiang Pingji said bluntly, "I inherited a dead body. When I woke up, Lu Lanting was already gone." Both the second lady and her father knew that Jiang Pingji was not Lu Lanting, but they still treated her as their daughter. This development infuriated her. At first she thought that the two were lying to themselves, but when she saw the old monk she suddenly understood. This was the root of the problem. This is not a lie. Young benefactor, you are indeed Lu Lanting. You should be Lu Lanting. A monk does not lie. Jiang Pingji bluntly exposed him. "You lied to me just now." Master Liaochen was speechless. Chapter 48. Well, there's no point in dwelling on it. Jiang Pingji rested her chin on one hand and looked at the old monk, waiting for him to speak. "Young lady, this is your mother's wish." The old monk twirled his beads. "When your mother lost 2 sons, she asked me to read the physiognomy of all the children in the house. None of them had the fate of an emperor, but your mother was certain that Lu Xi's daughter was destined to be an emperor." Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes. Was her mother really a woman who knew history? I'm not strong enough, so I asked a friend for help. Finally, I figured out that Lu Xi had the fate of being the father of an emperor, but the daughter of an emperor never showed up. Before your mother passed away, she seemed to have figured something out. To protect you, she asked me for a favor." The old monk said with a smile. "Your mother didn't care about the danger of being burned as a demon and told your father about her origin. She also said that she had 2 souls in her body since she was young, and one of them died because of the death tribulation. As her daughter, It is very likely that the young benefactor will. Jiang Pingji's hands trembled and she almost spilled the tea in her cup. 2 souls in one body? Did that mean that both the second lady and Lu Shi thought that the real Lu Lanting was the one who died? If that wasn't the case, little benefactor and your esteemed father would definitely harbor animosity toward each other. It's not impossible that they would eventually fall out. The old monk maintained his amiable smile. Moreover, your mother knew you were her daughter. There's no doubt about that. But why was she so sure that the death would happen at the age of 12? Jiang Pingji was shocked. She had an answer but she needed to verify it. Your mother had just given birth to you and your brother. Seeing that they were both intelligent, she secretly asked me if the body of the baby girl had been possessed by a thief. She said that the baby girl was supposed to be soulless until she was 12 years old. Jiang Pingji crossed her arms in front of her chest. Various clues kept flashing through her mind. According to the current information, that cheap mother was really a woman who knew about history. Or, in other words, in history this empress was quite famous. Moreover, in the history books, there were comments such as, she was as stupid as a tree when she was young and didn't understand human nature. Perhaps there were records of the empress and her biological father not getting along or even falling out with each other. However, the problem of spacetime had always been complicated. That cheap mother had memories of the future, and every move she made affected the so-called history. According to the old monk, although the mother knew about history, she was bound by it and did not live as she wished. How can something like fate be determined? If I really want to fight for supremacy in the future, it will be because I want to do so, not because fate dictates that I must do so. The so-called future is just one of thousands of possibilities, not the only one. It had always been the process that determined the results. When had the results determined the process? Jiang Pingji shook her head and said, it's boring, but I have to thank you for doing me a big favor. The reason of having 2 souls in one body was very nonsensical, but to the ancient people, it was a reason that was easier to accept, and it also saved them a lot of trouble. This old monk cannot accept young benefactor's thanks. The old monk shook his head and said greedily, young benefactor, you are still the most sensible. The way of fate is mysterious and not unchangeable. However, perhaps because you know these things, you will fall short of success in the future and you will lose the throne because of a wrong decision. Jiang Pingji snorted and said arrogantly, if I want it in the future then it can only belong to me. I will kill whoever tries to snatch it. Because of Jiang Pingji's declaration full of chunibyu, the livestream screen kept receiving gifts and flowers. Nongfu Shangquan Yudiangshuan, I like the way the host gives up treatment in the late stage of chunibyu. Nyoda Ida, yes, she gives up treatment in the late stage of chunibyu, but somehow it feels so good, */w***. Kulele Yael, give me my 40-meter broadsword. I am more looking forward to the greedy snake version of harem fighting. She can still become the emperor after getting rid of the emperor. She can sleep with men and she can sleep with their wives. Since ancient times it was good to have a wife. Even though the bullet screen was dirty, there were still old drivers who wanted to squeeze in with their cars. Oh Huang Saigao, what's so good about sleeping with the emperor? It's better to have a dog than harem fighting. It's disgusting to use a cucumber for public use. Sleeping San Guoshan, it's not challenging to be the empress in harem fighting. Which concubine can withstand a slap from the host? It's better to take the route of conquering the world and sleep with all the civil and military officials. Then there will be rumors of love affairs in the future. */w***. Yenling Shi. Sleep with all the civil and military officials plus 1 Shang Deji. Sleep with all the civil and military officials plus 2. Jiang Pingji's expression changed slightly when she saw the duplicates of the civil and military officials. Then she teased the audience in a good mood. Host V. Even if I have to sleep with someone, I should sleep with all the wives of the civil and military officials. The host likes girls the most. Sleeping San Guoshan. This kind of master will be doomed sooner or later. Yenling Shi. This kind of master will be doomed sooner or later. Jiang Pingji almost burst into laughter. It was just a joke. She liked girls, but her sexual orientation was normal. Jiang Pingji left the meditation room in a good mood and went to the hall of the side hall. She found Lu Shi kneeling on the cattail hassock, praying devoutly. She looked at the reincarnation tablet. Other than Gu Min and the 2 sons who died young, There was a newer but empty tablet next to it. Jiang Pingji's heart skipped a beat. She already knew who the tablet was for and why it couldn't be written with a name. Was it to avoid offending the living? Although she didn't believe in gods or Buddha, it was one thing to believe in them and another to express one's attitude. She also lit some incense and went forward to offer a few sticks. Jiang Pingji tried to ask, "Should I change my name?" The reincarnation tablet was empty and Lu Shi felt sad when he saw it. "It's okay. Make a new one." Lu Shi sighed and inserted the incense in his hand into the altar. He looked at it with a complicated and nostalgic look. "I thought I could have a bunch of children with Gu Min, so I prepared more than a dozen names a few years ago. There were boys and girls. Unfortunately, there were only 2 names that could be used in the end. The twin siblings actually used the same name. Actually, I've always been confused. Why did my father let me take the identity of my brother?" She could understand if it was a cliché TV series where the official mother was raised as a man to protect her position. But looking at the situation in the Lus, it was not necessary at all. It seemed that all the masters of the Lus knew that she was a woman. Lu Shi said in a strange tone, "How can a daughter live as freely as a son? Your mother had to learn the rules and etiquette when she was young. When did she not suffer?" He was right. You can live freely and happily for your brother. That's more important than anything else. If Lu Shi was not the second son who survived, how could he have lived to this age? Lu Shi sighed in his heart. A hint of gloominess flashed through his heart. As for the children, when she grew up, she would have a way to hide it from everyone. She didn't need to worry about the future of the family. Even if she lived a carefree life, the family property that she and Gu Min had saved in the first half of their lives was enough for her to spend. He was indeed a husband who had been taught by his mother for decades. His thinking was avant-garde and he was very receptive. Chapter 49. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. But what about Wei Jingxian's engagement? Lu Shi could tell what she wanted to ask. He raised his eyebrows with a hint of displeasure. The marriage was first proposed by the Wei's wife. She agreed to it because of the good relationship between the 2 families. Then your brother died. Min wanted to break off the engagement and get back the token, but the Wei's wife didn't agree. She only said that the child would grow up. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Why didn't she agree? Isn't it bad for your reputation if the engagement is broken off when you grow up? Lu Shi said, isn't it bad to have a bad reputation when you're young? Jiang Pingji was speechless. She really couldn't understand the ancient people's thinking. It was completely different. I don't think so. After all, she was only 3 or 4 years old. How could she have a bad reputation at such a young age? Jiang Pingji was deeply moved by the anti-humanity of this era. The reputation of having a bad reputation was really bad for girls in ancient times. Your brother died on the 2nd day after the 2 families exchanged the token. Speaking of this matter, Lu Shi actually felt resentful. He even unconsciously blamed Wei Jingxian for the death of his youngest son. However, he was rational and knew that this matter had nothing to do with the girl. He could only blame his youngest son for having such an unlucky life. They were not fated to be father and son. Jiang Pingji didn't say anything. Wei Jingxian was innocent, but the timing of the incident was too inopportune. After donating some money, the father and son finally came to an end. On their way down the mountain, Lu Shi took 2 pairs of new straw sandals from the housekeeper. He put 1 pair at Jiang Pingji's feet and said, "Going down the mountain is different from going up the mountain. It's easy to fall if you wear wooden clogs." Jiang Pingji smiled and put on the sandals. They didn't hurt her feet. Instead, they were soft. "Father, have you ever been taken advantage of before?" It didn't seem like it was his first time. Ignoring Jiang Pingji's teasing, Lu Shi said, "Your mother was stupid and almost disfigured." When they went down the mountain, the sun was already in the west. Looking at the long shadows on the ground, Lu Shi suddenly sighed. "Your father is really getting old. If I was still young, I might be able to carry you down the mountain." He knew his own body well. When Lu Shi was young, Gu Min had urged him to do all kinds of exercises. He always felt that those movements were rude, shameful, and stupid. But thanks to that, he had gotten rid of his days of major illnesses and minor disasters after exercising. His body and bones had become much healthier. But now he could barely climb the mountain. He really couldn't carry his daughter who was about to become an adult. Otherwise, both father and daughter would fall down. Jiang Pingji said, I don't mind carrying my father down there. Lucy smiled but didn't say anything. He touched her head again. She was raised as a son but she was still a daughter. How could she be stronger than a man? At that moment, Lucy subconsciously forgot that the second lady had told him that Jiang Pingji had single-handedly destroyed the entire bandit village. The journey down the mountain was very relaxing. Jiang Pingji chatted with Lucy and laughed. The atmosphere was very harmonious. However, when they talked about schoolwork, she suddenly remembered Master Yuanjing, whom Feng Jin had introduced to her. Jiang Pingji asked while secretly observing Lucy's expression. Father, I heard from a friend that Mother and Master Yuanjing are old friends? From your friend? Only a few people know about this. I don't think your friend is one of those old guys. Lucy's expression was calm. Your mother supported Master Yuanjing when she was young. When Min was alive, our families would occasionally interact. Indeed. That friend's surname is Feng and his name is Jin. He said that my studies are not good, and Master Wei Yuan's personality is not suitable for me. If there is a chance, I can visit Master Yuanjing in Laiyi County and see if I can become his disciple. Maybe I can be saved. Before Jiang Pingji finished her sentence, Lu Shi, who had been listening attentively, suddenly stopped walking. His expression was slightly stiff. He turned his head and looked at her. Who? What? Jiang Pingji didn't understand. She immediately understood that Lu Shi was referring to that friend. Feng Jin. Feng Jin? The one whose surname is Huayu? Lu Shi's face darkened. Nobody knew what he was thinking. It is indeed Huayu. Father, is there something wrong with him? Jiang Pingji's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Feng Jin's family was Lu Shi's political enemy? Lu Shi didn't look like a narrow-minded person. Why would he implicate his political enemy's descendant just because of his political enemy? He's just a kid. Lanting, you can just maintain a gentleman's relationship with him. There is no need to get close to him. Lu Shi regained his calm expression as if he wasn't the one who frowned in displeasure. Although Jiang Pingji didn't understand, Lu Shi was not the kind of person who liked to slander people behind their backs. Moreover, Feng Jin was only a teenager. He was too different from Lu Shi. He must have his reasons for saying that. After a few more steps, Lu Shi suddenly asked, How did Lanting and Feng Huayu meet? Jiang Pingji gave a concise and comprehensive description. On the 3rd of March, he and his companions were chased by bandits. They accidentally broke into the bandits' village and happened to bump into me and Jing. We had some misunderstandings, but they were all solved later. Lu Shi asked calmly, What do you think of his temperament? If Lu Shi asked about Feng Jin's talent, Jiang Pingji could praise him, but temperament? It would be more derogatory. He acts decisively and treats people well. But sometimes he will do anything to achieve his goals. A man must be ruthless. If a man isn't decisive and ruthless, he won't even know how he died. Jiang Pingji was speechless. That should be a compliment to Feng Jin, right? If you want to go to Laiyi County to look for Master Yuanjing, you can give it a try. In the previous dynasty, based on your age, it's time for you to leave home to study. It's a good thing to have the ambition to study abroad. But you don't have to reveal your identity. That person has a strange temper and doesn't take favors. According to my son's talent, he's no worse than his last disciple. Lu Shi changed the topic and didn't want to continue talking about Feng Jin. It was said that a woman's mind was hard to understand, but in her opinion, a man's mind was also like looking for a needle in a haystack. The carriage of the Lus was parked at the foot of the mountain. It was easier to go down than up. Soon they could see the familiar carriage. Lu Shi was deep in thought when he got in the carriage. Lanting, has Master Liaochen told you everything? Jiang Pingji answered, Yes, I've told him everything. Lu Shi asked, Then, what do you think about that matter? Still too early. If one day I really walk that path, I will naturally be the final winner. Rather than groveling at the feet of a brainless person, why not sit on the throne yourself? Jiang Pingji was not someone who liked to stir up trouble, but she was definitely not someone who was afraid of trouble. Lu Shi closed his eyes. Well, don't say these words to anyone else when you leave this carriage. Keep it to yourself. Chapter 50. That being said, who could say for sure what would happen in the future? Jiang Pingji loved to fight, but she was not a bloodthirsty person. As long as people did not come to her door and provoke her, she would not look for trouble. As for what the old monk had said about raising a flag and becoming a king, or even having an army and becoming an empress, it all depended on the situation. She did not like to stir up trouble, but she was not afraid of it either. Jiang Pingji was quite calm as she watched the orange sunset outside the carriage, but Lu Shi could not calm down. Back at the Lu residence, he asked Jiang Pingji to visit the second lady while he went straight to the main courtyard. He waved at the maids beside him and said, "Guard outside. No one is allowed to enter without my permission. If Lanting comes, remember to inform me." The two maids whispered, "Yes, sir." Lu Shi did not even look at them. Instead, he walked briskly to the room where he and Gumin used to live. According to the rules of the time, the legal wife usually lived in the east courtyard, but he and Gumin had always shared the same room. The furnishings in the room were the same as before his wife passed away. Lu Shi looked around and quickly walked to a corner of the room. He carefully opened the box and scratched the floor with the jade hairpin on his head a few times. Then he followed the traces and moved the brick away. The bottom was hollow and there were a few copper boxes inlaid with gold and silver. Each box was locked and the only key was kept by him. Opening one of the copper boxes, he cautiously and carefully took out a neatly folded silk cloth that was filled with words. "Love go little say." Net Lu Shi's expression was inexplicably gloomy after he read the contents of the silk cloth. He was stunned for a long time. He waited for Jiang Pingji to come and pay her respects before he reluctantly folded the silk cloth back to its original shape. He put it away and moved the box back. Lu Shi carefully smoothed out the creases in his clothes and adjusted his expression. After he was ready, he walked out of the room and went to the reception hall in the main courtyard. Lu Shi had previously told Jiang Pingji that she did not need to go to the family school anymore. Wei Gongchao was sick, so he was temporarily the teacher. He took the bamboo slips and the book from Jiang Pingji and flipped through them. "Are these what you've been reading recently?" A volume of military strategies and half a volume of the Analects of Confucius. He had originally used the study, so Lu Shi was very familiar with the books in the study. Many of the bamboo slips had his annotations. As soon as he opened the bamboo slip, he saw many new comments. His daughter's favorable impression of military strategies was much higher than that of the Analects of Confucius. Most of the comments on the former were pertinent, and there were even his own thoughts and hypothetical strategies. As for the latter, he and Jiang Pingji were the same. They had never liked the Analects of Confucius. They would even get headaches if they read too much of it. Sages once said that the people are the most important, the country is second, and the monarch is the most important. But when you're really in an officialdom with constant strife, you'll find that these words can only deceive those who don't understand. Sages' words are just words after all. Lu Shi closed the bamboo slip and put the half volume of the Analects of Confucius aside. He carefully read Jiang Pingji's comments on military strategies. Based on that sentence alone, Jiang Pingji was certain that Lu Shi was a weirdo in this era. He was a weirdo who could perfectly blend in with the rest of the ordinary flowers. Now that the Confucian school was popular, it was still the leader of the 100 schools of thought. Was it really appropriate for him to say that? Even in her previous life, where technology was so advanced and the land was so vast, inequality still existed. It was a common occurrence, not to mention in the ancient times, where civilization was abnormally backward. But she didn't expect that Lu Shi would say something like that to her. According to the thinking of the people in the ancient times, didn't they think that it was a normal phenomenon? Jiang Pingji couldn't reveal too much. She could only play along with his words and ask, "The monarch is the boat and the commoner is the water. The water carries the boat and the water capsizes the boat." From this, it can be seen that the commoner is more important than the monarch. Is it possible that the sage's words are also false? Lu Shi shook his head and corrected her. "No, I can't say that it's false. I can only say that it's too perfect." He knew that his daughter was extraordinary, but she was still a child who had not seen much of the world. Amin often said that at the age of 12, she was still a little girl who was still wet behind the ears. Some things needed to be guided correctly, not left unchecked, and let her learn by herself. 12 years old was the best age to mold people. After this period, their thinking would be fixed and it would be difficult to change. His daughter didn't like the Analects of Confucius, which could be seen from the few comments on it. But he couldn't deny it just because he liked it. Half of the Analects of Confucius to rule the world was not a joke. He had to learn it, but he had to learn it selectively. As a monarch, learning the analects of Confucius could help him hone his temperament. He would know how to control his subordinates, win people's hearts, and understand the public opinion. In short, there were many benefits. Wuxia had been an official in a remote place for many years, but after so many years his governance was very effective. The prosperity of the county was no less than that of Hejian County. From poverty to wealth and prosperity, the county under his rule had undergone earth-shattering changes. He could see clearly what the children of those rich families were like, and he was afraid that Jiang Pingji would go astray because of curiosity or arrogance. The sage's words are meant to restrain a gentleman, not a villain. You don't have to read too much about those vague words. Jiang Pingji believed that if Wuxia's words were thrown out, he would be condemned by the old-fashioned Confucian scholars. It was simply disgraceful. Wuxia smiled and said, "Even so, it also reveals a truth. Those who win people's hearts will win the world." The current Dongqing was not like that. The former emperor was absurd. He killed his father to ascend the throne. After he ascended the throne, he only knew how to enjoy himself. He did not cultivate his internal strength, appointed people through nepotism and trusted villains. Not only that, he even raped his uncle and sister-in-law and forced his uncle to die. When it came to the current emperor, it was even more exciting. He killed his brother, stole his sister-in-law, forcefully snatched his minister's wife, slacked off in government affairs, and only knew how to eat, drink, and have fun all day long. He was arrogant, tyrannical, muddle-headed, and blind. He favored the villains, indulged his cronies, and persecuted good ministers and generals. The court was a mess. Officials protected each other. Corruption rotted the foundation of Dongqing. There were too many unjust, false, and wrong cases. With such an emperor, Dongqing would be finished sooner or later. As for the three tribes of the northern borderline and the Count of Zhenbei, they were just the straw that broke the camel's back. If there was no peace negotiation, Dongqing could still hold on for a few more years. When the princes grew up, there might be a virtuous emperor who could rise to the throne. Perhaps he could still turn the tide and save Dongqing, which was on the verge of collapse. If there was peace negotiation, it would be hard to say if they invited a wolf into the house. The world was faintly in chaos, so he believed monk Liaochun's words. Jiang Pingji looked at Wuxia, who was smiling. He was very serious and did not seem to be joking at all. "I will remember father's words." Jiang Pingji secretly rolled her eyes. Wuxia was egging her on and warning her at the same time. The ancient era was very different from the era she lived in. It was not only in terms of technology but also in terms of culture and society. Wuxia's words were still useful to her. As for other things, she still needed time and space to understand them in detail. Chapter 51. Wuxia sat upright and motionless. He said slowly, "What the people want is naturally what they want." Throughout history, which emperor who lost the people's support survived for a long time? Let's not talk about the current emperor. The former emperor was considered one of the outstanding among them. He smiled contemptuously and briefly talked about the great achievements of the former emperor. He used detailed examples to deepen the impression and analyze them bit by bit. It was not boring and difficult, but it did not make people feel that he was talking empty words. As an emperor, he must rely on the power of the aristocratic families. However, the biggest foundation is still the people. Although Wuxia was born in a prestigious aristocratic family, he was not optimistic about the future of the aristocratic families. He even faintly felt that they would not last long. Of course, in this context, the aristocratic families had a huge influence on the court. They could even cover the sky with one hand. The former emperor failed because he offended the aristocratic families, but the core reason was that he lost the people's support. If not, how could Prince Gongshan of Hejian County break through Xiangyang City without any obstacles and put a sharp blade on the former emperor's neck? Prince Gongshan of Hejian County, Wu Meijin, was the emperor sitting on the dragon throne. He was the brother of the former emperor. However, when the two brothers fought, they did not care about family. After Prince Gongshan ascended to the throne, he even ignored the advice of the officials and ordered the former emperor to die. He prayed to the heavens for rain to appease the people. Jiang Pingji had a rough understanding of the situation. She felt that the background of the ancient times was inexplicably similar to the era she was in. In her era there were many aristocrats. Some aristocratic families were so powerful that they could even change the government of the Federation. But no matter how much they struggled, the ruler of the Federation was still the largest number of citizens. Whether it was aristocratic families or aristocrats, they could not live without those people. In this era the meaning was similar. No matter how powerful the aristocratic families were, they could not go against the voice of the people. Of course, some aristocratic families were arrogant and thought that they could play with the situation of the world in their palms. Such fools were like monkeys. As she was thinking, Lu Xi looked at her with gentle eyes. It was as if his dark and bright eyes were filled with clear spring water. You are my only child. My family has been very lenient towards you, so it's inevitable that you've been raised to the point where you don't know MT Tai. You can only see the prosperity in your eyes, but you can't see the rot and decay in the depths. The people's hearts may seem easy to write, but it's very difficult to write it beautifully. His pale fingers gripped the brush and steadily wrote down 2 large characters on a piece of bamboo paper. The will of the people. If the words have no bones, they are nothing but empty talk. If the words are formless, others will know their roots with a glance. It is easy to write but hard to do. Lu Xi smiled faintly. Jiang Pingji's expression changed when she heard that. Then what does father mean? Lu Xi threw the bamboo slip away. See it with your own eyes and understand it for yourself. Only then will you understand the content of the book better. Do you know how high the prices of goods are outside? Do you know what people need? Do you know why people who have left their homes are willing to sell their children? Without understanding the needs of the people, how could he truly consider for them? If they couldn't even do this, it would be impossible for them to win the hearts of the people. If they were betrayed and stabbed in the back because of this, it would be too humiliating. However, Jiang Pingji had another question in her mind. He said that Lu Lanting was his only child? Then what about the 2 concubines' sons and daughters in the backyard? Lu Xi's clear voice was especially heavy under the flickering candlelight in the study. It was as if he was hiding a deadly poison. Jiang Pingji also felt that the topic of father-son conversation was very dangerous. Lanting, do you want to hear about the interesting things I've encountered while I was in office? Lu Xi wisely stopped the topic and chose to let Jiang Pingji think about it herself. What he had said was not only related to being a ruler, but it was also related to being an official. How could an official who did not understand the needs of the people truly consider for them? He did not care which direction his daughter was going in. The only difference was the size of her ambition. Oh, there was a bedtime story to listen to. Jiang Pingji perked up. Of course I want to. Lu Xi used his calm and cool voice to talk about his experiences as an official in those places. The content was very broad, from the smallest of trifles to the sinister fights in the backyard, to the various situations in the marketplace, and to the infighting in the officialdom. It sounded frequent, but it was actually quite thrilling. No matter how poor a place was, there was no shortage of local tyrants. As a county chief from another place, he had to have some tricks up his sleeve if he wanted to govern a county. During the most difficult times, he was almost turned into a figurehead by the local gentry. As Madame Hu had said, Lu Xi's handsome appearance hid a belly full of dark water. If he couldn't do it from the front, then he would do it from the side. It didn't matter if his methods were honorable or not. Whose house did not have some secrets? Whose hands were completely clean? Whose wife could be truly calm and magnanimous when faced with a house full of concubines and sons and daughters of concubines? He was like a venomous snake on the hunt, calmly waiting for his prey to lower its guard. After a few months of lying low, he still managed to take care of those arrogant gentry. His way of telling stories was not old-fashioned. It was even a little humorous, but it was a far cry from his immortal-like image. Jiang Pingji had to admit that she was more curious about the outside world. She had a concrete impression of it in her mind. She didn't have to categorize everything in this era as the products of the backward and ignorant ancient times. Even though Lu Xi was worried that Jiang Pingji would become a naive girl who did not know the ways of the world, it was still a lucky hit. She said solemnly, "I understand what you mean, father." It's good. Lu Xi had recently become fond of this action. As he spoke, he took a small box from his side, opened it and took out the booklet inside. You're 12 years old this year. In 2 years you'll be at the age to get married and start a career. Jiang Pingji's mouth twitched uncontrollably. 12 years old. She would be 14 in 2 years. She would be starting a family? Suddenly she felt that those people in their 30s who were still studying hard in the higher education institutions in her previous life were like overgrown babies. What's this? She took the booklet from Lu Shi and opened it carefully. She almost couldn't understand it after looking through it. Your mother left you a list of dowries. The top one is hers and the bottom one was added by me over the years, Lu Shi said with a smile. Lu Shi smiled. Of course, I have other plans for your marriage. This list can't be considered a dowry. He had never planned to marry his daughter off. If that was the case, he would not have needed to hide the death of his second son many years ago. Jiang Pingji did not know much about the price of goods in that era, but she felt that there were a lot of things on the booklet. She looked at the end of the booklet and saw the land, rice and horse businesses. Her eyebrows twitched. Chapter 52. If they raised a flag and rebelled, they would definitely win at the starting line with the resources. In fact, that was indeed the case. If all the things in the book were converted into money, it would be several times richer than the national treasury of Dongqing. She really didn't know how Lu Shi had managed to amass such a large net worth without alerting anyone. Jiang Pingji suppressed her inner thoughts. Although she had only glanced at it a few times, she had memorized every single word on it. It was a pity that she could not understand the prices at that time, so she was not clear about the specific value of the contents. Marriage? Jinger? The Weiss have other plans. Her temperament is not suitable for you, so they will probably call off the marriage soon. Then, to protect her reputation, my son may have to suffer. Lu Shi sneered. He knew the Weiss plans like the back of his hand. The Weiss had insisted on keeping the marriage even though their second son was dead. They did not want Xian to be known as a jinx to her husband. But the two families could not let their daughters marry each other, could they? Even though it was part of Lu Shi's plan, he was still unhappy. Therefore, the Weiss should speak up and discuss the cancellation of the marriage. Jiang Pingji was not surprised. In this situation, women are always at a disadvantage. I'm fine. They knew that she was a woman, but they still married their daughter to Jiang Pingji. That family was either stupid or plotting something, or there was something wrong with the woman. Lu Shi calmly covered his trembling hands with his sleeves to hide his loss of composure. If Jiang Pingji had been a man, Lu Shi might have felt that his son was magnanimous and open-minded. But she was a girl. Why did it feel weird to hear her say that? Was it not good for his daughter to be such a man? Lu Shi raised his eyelids and said, "Oh, it's not easy to humiliate my son. I won't let them take advantage of me." If the marriage was cancelled when they were young, the man would bear most of the pressure. How could he be willing to do such a disadvantageous thing? Lu Shi was not a picky person, but he hated being at a disadvantage since he was young. The Weiss had to show their sincerity. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She secretly poked at the system and muttered to herself, "I think this cheap father is a little two-faced." The system said, "Host, how can you say that about others? Take a look at your own color first." Jiang Pingji's style was very similar to Lu Shi's. Who wouldn't believe that they were father and daughter? Perhaps it was because he was getting older, but Lu Shi's health wasn't as good as it was when he was young. After a few coughs, his eyes were bloodshot. He looked a little listless. He looked weak under the flickering candlelight. "Did you dismiss some guards a few days ago?" Jiang Pingji was practicing calligraphy under Lu Shi's guidance. She felt that it was much more efficient than fumbling around on her own. She stopped writing and looked up at him. "Yes, it's just a few unscrupulous and crafty ones. I threw them to the old butler and sold them." Lu Shi's question was not meant to reprimand her. "Although our mansion is small, we can't be short of guards. Tomorrow you will follow the butler to buy some useful servants. Come back and write a plan for me. Write whatever comes to your mind. The more detailed, the better." Lu Shi paused and continued. "In recent years, natural and man-made disasters have been happening. Refugees and bandits have fled everywhere. Even Hejian County is not peaceful. If it weren't for your quick thinking, I'm afraid you wouldn't have been able to get out of that situation so easily. I've thought about it. Coincidentally, we have some surplus food. If you're interested, you can take it to feed your troops and keep it for self-defense." Jiang Pingji's eyebrows twitched even more. Troops? According to her understanding, troops were considered private troops. They were equivalent to guards or servants. Not to mention the aristocratic families, even the gentry with some surplus food would feed them. The reason was similar to what Lu Shi had said. The current situation was not stable. One could encounter several groups of robbers and murderers when they went out. Some small places would even be looted by bandits. If one did not have some strength, he would not even know how he died. Now that the aristocratic families were powerful, the emperor was afraid of them. Another reason was that the aristocratic families had a lot of troops in their hands. Of course, for ordinary people, troops were servants and guards. But for Jiang Pingji, they were King private troops. Even though you're a boy in name, you're still a girl. You must have some means to protect yourself. Lu Shi sighed and took out a small piece of paper from his sleeve. He carefully unfolded it and showed it to her. Look at this. It's never wrong to prepare for a rainy day. Jiang Pingji took the paper and glanced at it. She immediately understood Lu Shi's intention. The content was actually very simple. The emperor also wanted to negotiate with the second prince to marry the princess of the northern borderline, but the decision had not been made public. She did not know which high-ranking official in the imperial court Lu Shi was in contact with to get first-hand information. Purchasing servants was the responsibility of the mistress of the house. It was within the scope of the inner court. A man like Jiang Pingji should not interfere. But since Lu Shi had spoken, it was obviously a test. How could the second mistress not agree? As for Madame Hu, she only sent a servant girl to pass on a message. She would listen to her cousin. The next day, the old housekeeper came back with 2 booklets. Master said that everything today will be decided by the second Langjun. Jiang Pingji took the booklet and glanced at it. She asked, "Are these the records of the purchasing servants in the manor in recent years?" She realized that the bookkeeping habits of the Lu manor were very different from those outside. They were more clear and organized, and they were in tabular format. It clearly recorded the value of the buyer as well as their name and background. Some of the buyers were even from the same family. It even recorded their current positions and specialties. She flipped through it and, with her strong memory, memorized all the names of the servants inside and outside the Lu residence. Needless to say, this bookkeeping format must have been created by Lu Shi's mother. It would be much more convenient to use it to manage the inner court. The old housekeeper stood with his hands in front of his chest. He looked calm. Yes. These are the records of the changes in the servants in the manor in recent years. Of the 2 booklets, one was the records of the past few years and the other was brand new. She did not even have to think to know what it was used for. If that's the case, I'll follow the old rules and go to the broker house first. She did not know how many broker houses there were in Hejian County, so it was better to start with the ones she was familiar with. At least the possibility of being deceived would be lower. If it was any other day, she would have asked the broker house to bring the servants to the manor and then she could take her time to choose. But it was a test set by Lu Shi that day. Thinking of the conversation with the people the night before, Jiang Pingji decided to go out on her own and learn about the prices outside. What she heard from others and what was written in books was not as convincing as seeing it with her own eyes. Chapter 53. The old housekeeper was very pleased to hear this. His wrinkled old face finally smoothed out and he looked a little more relaxed. In fact, he was quite worried that the second Langjun, who had always been cooped up at home, would give out orders for the first time without knowing anything. Messing things up was secondary. The Lu residents didn't care about the damage caused, but they were afraid that Master wouldn't like them. After all, he had watched Lu Shi grow up. The old housekeeper hoped that Lu Shi and his son would be closer to each other. Jiang Pingji changed into plain clothes before she left. She sat in the carriage and occasionally lifted the curtain to look outside. Turning on the livestream mode, she casually glanced around and found that there were 3,000 viewers in the livestream room waiting for today's livestream. Unfortunately, as a first-class streamer, Jiang Pingji's streaming room could only accommodate 3,000 viewers. If she wanted to increase the upper limit, she would have to upgrade. However, leveling up would require a huge amount of popularity points. She could only save them for now and could not spend them. Playing with the sandalwood fan in his hand, he sat upright in the carriage. When he raised his head, several comments from the audience appeared on the screen. "Oh Huang Sai Gao, I was scared to death. I thought the streamer was going to open the window today, so I cut the screen and came over. Nongfu Shangquan Yudiangshuan. Why is the screen shaking? Bai Gui Yeshing. The streamer is obviously in the carriage. Can the screen not shake? Yimi Yangguang. Not everyone has the right to sit in the carriage in ancient times. Even poor merchants don't have the right. The host status is quite high. If this carriage was in our hands, it would be a Maserati worth a few million, right? Although it was a horse carriage, the interior of the carriage was quite complete. Not only was there a table, but there was also a hidden box with the 4 treasures of the study and snacks to pass the time. If he was tired of sitting, he could still lean on the table to relax. If he was sleepy, he could still sleep. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was the advanced shock absorption system inside the carriage. Before she boarded the carriage, she noticed that the structure of the carriage was different from the ones she had seen before. The shock absorption system was more complete. However, when he thought about the butterfly hairpin he saw in the second madam's room, it also had springs on it. It meant that Mother Lu had experimented with this thing before. In order to pursue comfort, it didn't seem impossible to use springs on the carriage to make a shock absorber system. Was Zhou Bai. Today's host is still as handsome as ever, */w***. On the screen, Jiang Pingji was dressed in a green silk robe. The cuffs of her robe were embroidered with delicate auspicious clouds. A piece of white jade hung on her waist. The sandalwood fan in her hand occasionally closed and opened with a swoosh as she moved lazily. She tapped the palm of her hand with the fan. Tudu Feichio, is the host going to school? Host V. No, I've dealt with a lot of guys because of the previous incident. Now I'm going to the broker house to buy some servants to look after the yard. Buyer D. Wasn't that human beings being bought and sold? Even though they knew that such transactions were common in ancient times and that it was only natural when they read novels, many felt that it was a little strange when they watched the live stream. However, they could not find fault with Jiang Pingji's actions. Lu Lanting's body was too weak. Even though she was sitting in the carriage, her back was sore from sitting on her knees for a long time. She leaned on the table and thought about the summary she would write to Lu Xi after choosing the servants. After a while, the old housekeeper lowered his voice and said, "Second Langjun, we're here." There were many officially approved brokers in Hejian County, but the one that was closest to the Lus and had a good reputation was the one in front of her. Jiang Pingji put away her sandalwood fan and glanced at the plaque hanging on the door. I can't tell that this is a broker house just by looking at the door. Of course, when she entered, she found an even more interesting scene. The interior was decorated like a normal merchant's house. She whispered to the old housekeeper, "It's different from what I imagined. I thought it would be dirty and messy." The old housekeeper stood with his hands by his side and said in a serious tone, "Broker houses are divided into different levels. The kind you mentioned is probably the lowest of the lowest. They specialize in cheating and forcing people to buy and sell. The people they hire are of unknown origins. There's no way the Lu's family would want those kinds of servants." More importantly, the old housekeeper did not have the guts to bring Jiang Pingji to that kind of place. If they met someone who thought that they were easy to bully because of their plain clothes, they might get bullied. That's true. The difference between a licensed business and an unlicensed business is always different, Jiang Pingji replied with a smile. Under normal circumstances, when a rich family wanted to buy a servant, they would directly send a steward to the broker house to inform them. There were people like Jiang Pingji who came to the house herself, but most of them were from poor families. When the woman broker heard the news, she thought there was something wrong with her ears. Of course, when she saw the old housekeeper of the Lus, she immediately went up to him. "What kind of wind blew you here today?" The woman broker was plump and strong with a fierce-looking face. Her hair was pinned with a bright red silk flower, and she wore a shiny golden ornament that shone brightly under the sunlight. Just by standing there, she exuded a rich aura. The old housekeeper was tall, but because of his old age he looked a little thin. Compared to the old woman broker, he was like a bamboo pole. The old housekeeper secretly rejected the old woman broker's flattery. He raised his brows and said, "I have business to attend to today. Be careful not to offend you." After all, he was the housekeeper of the Lu's residence. He knew almost everyone who had dealings with the Lus, including the old woman broker. The smile on the old woman broker's face froze for a moment. But in the blink of an eye, she smiled even more brightly. She secretly looked at Jiang Pingji. In Hejian County, there were many rich families in a small place. Generally speaking, the Lus were not the top big shot, but everyone knew that the second branch of the Lus was rich. The famous bamboo paper workshop and several prosperous bookstores were all owned by the second branch. There were also other restaurants and restaurants. The owner came in person. This was a big deal. The old woman broker had been in the business world for many years. What kind of people had she not seen? To be able to do business like this, she must have some tricks up her sleeves. He had an idea. She quickly led Jiang Pingji and her servant to the seats of honor. Then she lowered her posture and knelt down. She looked flattering and respectful. Jiang Pingji opened her sandalwood fan and asked the old woman broker, "How many boys between 10 and 30 years old do you have here? They must be healthy, clean and have a clean background. They must not have committed crimes. Because we are buying guards, if they are skilled the price can be increased. It would be best if they were adult men. She just needed to teach them some martial arts. But if she formed her own private army she would be too old. There was not much room for her to teach them." Chapter 54. Servants. The woman broker was startled and turned to look at the old housekeeper. Jiang Pingji saw it and frowned. She closed the sandalwood fan in her hand and tapped it on her palm. She asked coldly, "Is there a problem?" In the blink of an eye, her cold eyes were filled with unfriendliness. It was as if a huge rock was pressing on people's hearts, making them feel depressed. Although the broker house had official permission and was a legitimate business, it was still making dirty money from human trafficking. In this line of work, who could compare to them when it came to the ability to adapt to the situation and speak the right words for the right people? The woman broker in front of them was a leader in the industry. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to run the business to such an extent. But now it was strange. The woman trader was almost suffocated by Jiang Pingji's imposing manner. She had no choice but to lower her stout body. Sweat was dripping from her forehead like greasy oil, and the silk flowers in her hair were trembling because of her movements. Nongfu Shanquan Yudiangshuan. Excuse me? So the streamer is going to choose servants today? Yingbasin Sangwashan. Ha, there is hope to sleep with all the officials and generals. The streamer is going to have a private troop? Yimi Yongguang. But it's strange. Why did the woman broker react like that when the streamer said she wanted to buy servants? Not only did the audience want to know the answer, but Jiang Pingji was also confused. However, seeing the old housekeeper's expression, she suddenly understood the cause and effect. She smiled and added, "By the way, the servants sold by the loos don't need to be sent to me." Most of the servants sold by the loos had been sent to the broker house. Why was the woman broker so surprised? In fact, if one thought about it, it was understandable. As long as one had some foundation, the guards in the house were all born in the house. They were guaranteed to be loyal to the master. For a guard like this who went out to buy things, not only did he not have a clean background but his loyalty was also a problem. The loos were not prosperous but they had been around for hundreds of years. Jiang Pingji came out to buy servants, so of course the woman broker would be surprised. At that moment the old housekeeper calmly spoke and dispelled the woman broker's doubts. He then went to pick the suitable servants. As a small role model in the industry, the middleman's ability to handle matters was commendable. In just a short while she had already gathered enough people. Granny broker said fawningly, replying to Lang Jun, "Your servant has brought them here. They are all waiting in the courtyard." Her voice was so sweet that it could almost cause diabetes. If her body was not still trembling unconsciously, she would probably sound more natural. "This is really strange. I thought it was a big deal, so I walked over eagerly. Who knew that when I met the young man's eyes, I actually felt as if my clothes were being stripped off, and even the color of my heart was being seen by the other party. My whole body felt cold." Jiang Pingji looked at the woman broker's unnatural posture. Her pale lips curled into a faint smile. She stood up and said, "Then let's go and take a look. If they're not to your liking, I'll have to trouble you to find another group of people." Of course. In the whole of Hejian County, there is no better broker house than mine. The old woman broker patted her chest and promised. The people waiting to be selected were all in the yard. The woman trader eagerly led the way and hinted, "Is there anyone else you want to look at?" Granny broker? What was her task? If the officials or the rich wanted to buy their favorite concubines, singers, dancers, cooks, needlework, or rough servants, they would look for a female broker. This was where the real profit came from. For example, the servants and attendants, although the price was high, they were rarely sold. The housekeeper was old but his ears were sharp. He almost blew his beard and stared at Jiang Pingji. Jiang Pingji was not a decent person. She raised her eyebrows and said in a flirtatious manner, "What is there to look at in your place?" Seeing that there was a chance, the old woman broker suddenly became spirited. She strongly recommended, "Lang Jun, don't be fooled by my small shop, but the quality is excellent. Even the top girls in Lang Lang Alley came from here. They are all first-class beauties." Lang Lang Alley sounded weird, but it was actually the red light district, a place that could not be spoken of. "Is that true?" Ignoring the old housekeeper's awkward cough, Jiang Pingji smiled and pretended to be very interested. "I've heard people talk about the girls in Lang Lang Alley. I heard that they are not only beautiful but also talented. I was wondering which master had the ability to train and teach them well. I didn't expect them to be right in front of me." The housekeeper was speechless. "Yimi Yangguang, I didn't expect you to be such a hardcore streamer. You even teased the granny broker." When Jiang Pingji praised someone, she liked to look them in the eye. Her eyes were like a pool of crystal clear water, full of sincerity. People could not help but believe what she said. Even the granny broker, who was used to seeing the world, felt a little embarrassed. The housekeeper braced himself and said in a low voice, "Second Langjun, this. Everyone loves beauty. If I can bring home a beautiful girl, won't I be happy to look at her every day?" The old housekeeper was speechless. He had a bad feeling. His second Langjun wouldn't go to Lang Lang Alley just to look at a beautiful girl, would he? As they spoke, the three of them arrived at the courtyard. There were a few rows of people standing in the open space. They were arranged according to their height. Although they were wearing coarse linen clothes with a few patches, these people's spirits and appearance were considered good. Their skin didn't seem to have much dirt. Regardless of their appearance, they gave a good first impression. The broker house had been doing well in Hejin County for many years. It was reasonable that it was doing better than other brokers. "Do you have any records of these people's backgrounds?" Jiang Pingji walked to the front of the crowd and glanced at each of them. A lot of information appeared in her mind, but it was quickly digested. She had already made a decision. As a broker house, it was natural to have a lot of information on the goods. The records were not complicated, but they were piled up without order. It was not as clear as the account books of the Lus. He was not picky. She flipped through it quickly. People who did not know would think that she was fanning herself with it. The granny broker was a little unhappy. She thought that Jiang Pingji would not be able to choose a good servant with such an attitude. Bracing herself, she pointed at a tall and sturdy man. He was the most powerful person in the group and he had some skills. "Langjun, what do you think of this one? He's hardworking, honest and clean. If it weren't for the fact that his parents passed away, he wouldn't have sold himself here." Even though the granny broker was evil, she did not dare to trick Jiang Pingji. Under normal circumstances, the strong man would be a good choice, but Jiang Pingji did not like him. "Oh, no need. I'll get rid of him," Jiang Pingji said without looking up. His parents died because of his laziness. Everyone was speechless. Chapter 55. Genius 1 second. Remember Love Go Away? We provide you with exciting novels to read. Although he had muscles that looked scary, who was Jiang Pingji? She could tell at a glance whether they were real or not. They were muscles that had been trained through a lot of labor. That strong man had good genes and a good body given by his parents, but his steps were weak. She could easily send two of them flying with one slap. He had lived in the wilderness for 2 years in his hometown. His fingers did not have many calluses and the skin on his arms was even. There were no signs of farming or hunting. The woman broker said that his parents had passed away and he had to sell himself to pay for their burial. But according to her, that was not the case. As expected, when she casually said these words, the expression in the man's eyes changed. They were filled with fear and cowering. Although the woman broker did not know how Jiang Pingji knew, she also felt embarrassed. What was the scariest thing for a person in her line of business? Wasn't it because the goods were not right? Her reputation was ruined and she lost her source of income. She thought that the person she recommended was a good one and that Jiang Pingji could see her honesty. She did not expect to be slapped in the face in public. Eliminate this one as well. Eating, drinking, whoring and gambling are more reliable than me. Do you think you can be a boss after buying him? The woman broker's mouth twitched. She almost tore the handkerchief in her hand in half. She was going to recommend the one Jiang Pingji pointed at. The man was in his 20s. He had a good physique. He had read a few words in his childhood. He was smart and had a good eye for people. Logically speaking, he was a good man. She did not expect the man in front of her to tell her the inside story that she did not know. Jiang Pingji said, "He has a hidden injury in his ankle. It's not obvious when he walks slowly, but it's obvious when he walks quickly. How can he guard the house?" The woman broker was dumbfounded again. The people she had chosen had to be healthy. After all, they were hired to guard the house. Other standards could be set aside for now, but their physical conditions had to be up to standard. Otherwise, how could they protect the master's family? But, looking at the man's evasive eyes, the woman broker knew that Jiang Pingji was telling the truth. And this one Nong Non Tong. The Lius don't dare to take in such a scumbag. It's disgusting. Under the watchful eyes of the woman trader, Jiang Pingji eliminated a few people in a row. She gave a variety of reasons which stunned everyone. After a round of screening, Jiang Pingji glanced at the remaining people and said to them, "Stretch out your right hand." The people of this era had poor physical fitness and poor bones. It was impossible for Jiang Pingji to use the standards of her previous life to filter them, but she would choose the tallest among the shortest. With her eyesight she could filter out those with problems and the rest would depend on their aptitude. Sleeping all over Three Kingdoms male god. The streamer knows how to feel bones? There were many classic plots in novels where one would feel one's bones to determine one's aptitude. How would one do that? In fact, Jiang Pingji did not know how to feel bones, but she had seen a lot and had her own way of identifying aptitudes. If one were to insist that this was bone touching, the essence was more or less the same. However, she didn't need to touch it herself. Just by looking at his arm she could roughly visualize the skeleton in her mind. In other words, if she wanted to, any creature in her eyes would be nothing more than a skeleton. Host V. No, but the skeleton can indeed be used as a basis to determine one's aptitude and potential, but it cannot be regarded as the final basis. At most, it can be regarded as a reference. Depending on the body, the state of development, and the state of the skeleton will be different, which will interfere with the judgment. For a warrior, aptitude is not as important as temperament and willpower. The latter can sometimes create impossible miracles. Sleeping all over Three Kingdoms male god. How many people do you plan to choose? Host V. The quality of the soldiers is more important than the quantity. I'll train a few guards first and then we'll talk about the future. Jiang Pingji had read military strategies a few days ago, and she had also read some books related to the battlefield. She had even asked Lu Shi himself. After combining the information from various sources, she had a general understanding of the war in this era. If the information showed that the first party had 200,000 soldiers and the second party had 150,000 soldiers, and there was a huge disparity between the two sides, which side had the highest probability of winning? Excluding factors like timing, geographical and human conditions, most people would think that the first party had a high probability of winning. In fact, the ratio of winning and losing was basically 50-50. Even if the first party had an advantage, it was not a big one. In the war in this era, it did not mean that the side with more people had a higher probability of winning. In fact, that was not the case. On the surface, there were as many as 350,000 people on both sides, but the number of people that really determined the outcome of the war was probably less than 50,000. The real competition was between the elite soldiers and the ratio was very small. The rest of the soldiers were just bystanders. The weapons in their hands were just sharpened tree trunks and they wore coarse linen clothes. Those who were slightly better would be wrapped in leather armor. Their defense was basically zero. The elites of the first and second parties would fight against each other. Based on the situation of the battlefield, if the winning side's morale was high, the bystanders would rush forward aggressively. If the winning side lost, the bystanders would definitely run away faster than anyone else. They would flee in panic. There were many cases in history where the few won against the many. Excluding factors like timing, geographical and human conditions, there was a lot of water in the water. Considering these problems, if Jiang Pingji really wanted to raise some troops, she would, of course, go the route of elite soldiers. Of course, the elite soldiers were still very ugly in her eyes. If it was her in the past, she could kill a bunch of them with one slap. This one, and this one. Stay here and record them in the booklet. Jiang Pingji picked and chose. In the end, there were only a few people left in the yard. Most of them were teenagers under the age of 15. There were only a few young men and there were less than 15 of them in total. Are they all here? Jiang Pingji looked around with some dissatisfaction. She turned to the woman broker and asked, "It seems like there are not enough people." The old housekeeper was worried at first, but as Jiang Pingji picked, he was finally relieved. All that was left in his heart was relief. Although the style was not quite the same, the second Lang Jun really had the demeanor of the old master when he was young. The woman broker hesitated. She was also afraid of the young master. He was very evil. There are some, but they are not very suitable for Lang Jun's requirements. Some of them have a criminal background. There were many kinds of goods in the broker house. Some were children from good families who sold themselves, some were sold by relatives, some were slaves who had committed crimes and were bought from the government, and some were servants who had been sold in other mansions. Criminal background? Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. She had thought that she could choose enough people, so she set the requirements more strictly. She did not expect that after the selection, there were only about a dozen people who were barely satisfied. Obviously, the number of people was very limited. Bring them here to have a look. The old housekeeper was not calm anymore. He could not let those dangerous people with criminal records get close to his Lang Jun. Jiang Pingji knew what he was thinking, so she spoke first to stop him from saying anything. "I'm just going to have a look. We'll talk about it later if I'm satisfied." Chapter 56. If it was just to guard the house, Jiang Pingji would definitely not use those with criminal records. After all, she had to think about the safety of the Liu family. But if it was to train private soldiers, that was another matter. She had yet to meet a troublemaker that she could not handle. Deep in her bones was a spirit that loved to pursue thrills and thrills. Sometimes it could even be said to be sick. She remembered in her previous life, before she became the commander of the army, her superior trained her, but he also had a headache because of her temper. Every now and then she would see a psychiatrist for guidance. The psychiatrist did not alleviate her mental symptoms and she almost drove them crazy. After all, not everyone had strong psychological endurance. They could not accept a stranger flipping them over the moment they met. Under the sharp gaze of the old housekeeper, the broker ordered the goods that were difficult to sell to be brought over. Almost everyone wore shackles on their hands and feet. They did not look like the goods in the broker house. If they wore prison clothes, they would look like criminals. Are these all sold by the government? Jiang Pingji glanced at them. Half of them had tattoos on their faces. They had been branded. Some of them are official slaves. Some of them were originally sentenced to death, but they were lucky enough to be released due to an amnesty. Looking at those people who were either dead silent, mocking, or harboring evil intentions, the woman broker's intestines turned green with regret. Although she was in a hurry to get rid of them, if Jiang Pingji really liked some of them and brought them back, the Lus would definitely not let the broker house off. Love go little short net amnesty? Jiang Pingji searched her memory and found that there was indeed such a thing. The government was celebrating the birthday of his favorite concubine. In addition, the drought that had been on and off in Dongqing for more than half a year had been alleviated. Calculating the time, it should be early February. Under the nervous gaze of the old housekeeper, Jiang Pingji walked in a big circle and stopped in front of a young man who was about 16 or 17 years old. Sleeping Sangwa Xianxia. He's really good looking. I feel that his facial features are a bit similar to the little fresh meat that was popular some time ago. Tudu Feichio. Sigh, I wouldn't have noticed if you didn't mention it. But this one looks more mature and manlier than those little fresh meats. In ancient times, one could start a family at the age of 13 or 14. At the age of 16 or 17, one would already be the father of a string of little kids. Naturally, one would be more mature and steady. However, Jiang Pingji's focus was not on looks. In fact, she was not very concerned about the looks of people other than women. Raise your head and let me see. Jiang Pingji did not use her hand to pinch his chin. Instead, she used the tip of her sandalwood fan to lift his chin. He seemed to dislike such a humiliating action, but his strength was no match for hers. What a pity. This was also a convict who had been branded. The tattoo mark was on the right side of his face near his ear. Because he hadn't taken good care of it, the wound had started to fester and ooze out a fishy yellow liquid. Some of his flesh had even rolled out, mixed with wisps of bright red. It looked quite horrifying. Yimi Yongguang. Ah! It looks even more like it from this angle. His eyes are so good / greater than over equal. Perhaps it was the seduction of beauty, but Jiang Pingji's sharp eyes saw a row of lollipops and lovers' hearts floating across the screen. The young man who was forced to raise his chin slightly squinted his dark and bright eyes. His thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly, and his eyes seemed to hide a sharp blade. Being stared at by him made one feel a sense of dread, as if someone was stabbing their eyelids with a knife. His bloodless lips were dry and pale, and there were even some cracks. His cheeks were dyed a sickly red because of the heat. Because he raised his head, his neck was long and slender. His untidy collar was loose, revealing the delicate curves of his collarbone. The old housekeeper silently moved his eyes away. The scene was too beautiful for him to look at. The woman trader also sighed with regret. It is indeed a pity. Even if the wound on his face heals, it will still leave an ugly scar. At the moment, the trend was for fair and delicate beauty. Many gentry families pursued the fashion of putting flowers on their hair and applying powder. However, the public sense of beauty had not changed much. They were still very clear about the difference between beauty and ugliness. Although this young man looked more heroic, he was still a rare beauty. If his face was not ruined, he would definitely be very popular if he was sold to a brothel with his appearance. Langjun, stay away from him. Be careful of his illness. The old housekeeper stood aside and disapprovingly looked at the fan in Jiang Pingji's hand. She smiled and put away the sandalwood fan. Her eyes lingered on the young man. His eyes were full of unwillingness, as if he was an underage cub locked up in a cage. He had the ability to roar in the forest, but he was helpless against the reality. Woman trader, what did he do? The woman trader thought for a moment and said, he is from the county next door. His mother went out to buy vegetables and bumped into a noble. She was pushed and fell to the ground. Unfortunately, she hit her head and passed away. When he found out, he took a knife and went to seek revenge. He killed a servant and was arrested. Originally, he was sentenced to 30 years of exile, but the family refused to accept it. They used their connections to send him to the death row. Not only did he kill someone, but he also offended the nobles. That family would definitely use their connections to take his life. However, he was lucky enough to be granted amnesty. Because there was a reason for it, and the motive for the murder was out of filial piety, he was taken out of the death row prison and became a slave. He went back and forth a few times and finally he fell into her hands. The woman trader carefully suggested, he is a thorn in the side. He is not easy to train. Why don't you look for someone else? Jiang Pingji pursed her lips and smiled. She opened her fan and smiled. No, I'll take him. The old housekeeper and the woman trader were speechless. Why did she hate him so much? It's hard to find someone who is literate. It's even harder to find someone who is literate and has some brains. It's just a few taels of silver. The young man glared at her. She could even hear him grinding his teeth. Jiang Pingji looked at the young man and smiled meaningfully. She was lucky, but the young man's luck was terrible. If it weren't for her, he could definitely escape from the broker house that night. He was only one step away from the long journey. But such a prison break was nothing in front of her. At most, it would arouse her interest. What's his name? The woman trader's brain seemed to have short-circuited. She only regained her composure now and quickly answered. His name is Su Ku. Jiang Pingji asked casually, do you have a courtesy name? The young man had practiced martial arts, but there were thick calluses on his fingers from holding a brush. He must have studied for a long time. No matter who gave him his name, the scholars in ancient times should have a courtesy name. Jiang Pingji still did not understand why naming was so complicated. A name was a name. Why bother with a messy courtesy name? The woman trader could not answer. She secretly kicked Su Ku and glared at him fiercely. Langjun asked you a question. Su Ku pursed his lips. The anger in his chest had not been extinguished, but the situation was against him. He could only suppress it for now. Chapter 57. Replying to Langjun, my name is Xiaoyu. Su Ku lowered his head, trying not to let others see the hatred in his eyes. Jiang Pingji mocked. Xiaoyu? Why wasn't it foolish filial piety? There's nothing wrong with avenging your mother, but have you become stupid after studying for so many years? You dare to pick up a knife and seek revenge just because you have some skills? It's fine if you can kill your enemy with your own hands, but you just let your enemy lose a dispensable servant and you even lost yourself. This brain, why do I feel that buying you now is a bit of a loss? To do Feiqiu. That's a slap in the face. Just half a minute ago you said that buying him would be a good deal. Unlucky adventure welcomes you. Streamer, I'm telling you, as long as you travel through time, you can definitely find a top talent in a broker house. I think this Suku is very promising under smiley face triangle. Under even if he's brainless he can still warm the bed in the future. Maybe he's the male lead. Nongfu Shangquan Yudiangshuan. Why isn't it the female lead? Ignoring the young man who suddenly raised his head, she waved her hand, and someone naturally categorized Suku into the shopping column. After another round of picky choices including Suku, she chose another 6 people. Including the previous ones, there were a total of 20 people. Have you memorized everything? Jiang Pingji asked the old housekeeper. Let's settle those people in the farm outside and train them well. The old housekeeper was a little upset, but his face was full of wrinkles, so it was impossible to see his expression. The old master had also said that Jiang Pingji would make all the decisions for the day, and he only needed to do what he was supposed to do. Langjun, I've noted everything down. By the way, buy 2 strong old maids, the kind that can cook big wok dishes. Jiang Pingji hadn't even taken 2 steps when she said to the woman broker, it's best if they're hardworking and keep their mouths shut. Don't even consider those who like to cheat. The old housekeeper was puzzled. The Lu residence was not big and there were only a few masters to serve. Therefore there were enough servants for now. Jiang Pingji suddenly wanted to hire 2 more rough old women, but she did not know what to do with them. It was a big business for the broker house to buy 22 men at one time, not to mention that 20 of them were valuable men. The price of adult men was the highest and the younger ones were slightly cheaper. The old women who did rough work could also be sold for 8 or 9 taels of silver. This was a legitimate business and they still had to go to the government for an open road, so it wouldn't take much time. After settling the debt, Jiang Pingji received a stack of contracts from the woman broker. She took out Su Xiaoyu's contract. Tell the farm people to keep an eye on that Su Xiaoyu. Don't let him escape. Jiang Pingji put away the contract and smiled meaningfully. She reminded him, if you catch him in the middle of the night, remember to inform me immediately. If he's lost, I'll settle the score with you. After buying people from the broker house, Jiang Pingji had other things to do. Luxi's test was not over after buying people. There was a series of follow-up tasks. He had to know how to settle the people, daily training and expenses. Speaking of expenses, she had to know the purchasing process and the prices of the goods. Only then could she use the budget more rationally. I feel like I was tortured by my boss. Jiang Pingji sat in the carriage. The table was covered with paper and a pen. She opened the new booklet given by the old housekeeper and recorded the name, identity, and purchase price of each servant in detail. The bullet screen was full of laughter. It was rare to see the streamer who had always been successful being defeated. They seized the time to have some fun. The farm's area is not small. We can let them farm while training. We can try to be self-sufficient, balance their income and reduce their consumption. Clothes every season are another expense, and we also need to prepare the necessary training tools. In order to motivate them, we can set up a reward and punishment system. Jiang Pingji copied the draft she had already written on the bamboo paper. In the end, looking at the bamboo paper full of words, Jiang Pingji was finally satisfied. The next step was to understand the basic prices of goods, and try to use the budget she had to reduce unnecessary waste. Apart from these arrangements, she also had to come up with a training plan. Otherwise, how could she train a flock of sheep into real lions? Unfortunately, the genetic quality of the people in ancient times was not good, and their physical fitness was far from the standard of her era. Many of the popular training methods of the future could not be popularized. She could not mechanically copy them, so she could only adjust them according to the conditions of the current era. To put it more vividly, the difficulty of training for children in her era was like hell in this era. Jiang Pingji licked her lower lip expectantly. Her eyes were full of interest. She loved challenges like these. Every challenge could stimulate the calm and cool blood in her body. She could not help but be excited. I really can't wait. To do Feiqiu. Why do I have a bad feeling? Looking at the streamer's smile, I feel the air around me turn cold. Yimi Yongguang, you're not alone. I feel cold too. I'm a newbie and I'm shivering. Should it be said that the purer a person is, the stronger their intuition? Looking at the bullet screen that flew past, Jiang Pingji was finally willing to restrain the emotions in her heart. She stopped smiling. It was the beginning of March, so the sky darkened early. Life in ancient times was boring. The rich could still light a lamp to read, listen to dramas, and find something to do to pass the time. Ordinary people, on the other hand, ate early and went to bed early. It was almost mealtime, so the housekeeper urged her to go back and eat with Lu Xi. Before Lu Xi came back, the Lius ate separately. But now that the master of the house was back, it was inappropriate for the family to eat separately. When she arrived at the main hall, Jiang Pingji was surprised to see Madame Hu, who usually stayed in her yard, sitting on the left side of Lu Xi. As for the second lady, she was still resting in her yard because of her health. Jiang Pingji bowed to Lu Xi with the etiquette of this era and nodded to Madame Hu. Coincidentally, the servants came in with the food. Third brother and second sister are eating in their own rooms? Jiang Pingji asked while the servants were still arranging the table. In this era, it was important not to talk while eating. The rules of the Lius were not as strict as those of the Lius, but basic etiquette was still important. If Jiang Pingji had any questions, she could only ask them before mealtime. Otherwise, she would have to stay silent until the end of the meal. Madame Hu looked down as if she was looking at the delicate embroidery on her clothes. Lu Xi frowned, but he did not speak. In the end, it was Madame Hu who broke the awkward silence with a smile. Third Lang Jun was too playful a few days ago and his face was disfigured. According to the doctor, he needs to rest in his room for a while and control his food intake. Otherwise it will leave a scar. The second Yangzi is still young and shy. She blushes easily when she talks too much. Cousin has always been serious. If he keeps a straight face, the girl will cry. Chapter 58. Lu Xi did not say a word throughout the meal, as if he had not heard the conversation between Jiang Pingji and Madame Hu. The meal was finished in silence. Perhaps it was the influence of Jiang Pingji's soul, but this body's appetite was much larger than Lu Lanting remembered. The cook's cooking skills were excellent, and even though the seasoning of this era was incomplete, it was more than enough for Jiang Pingji, who was used to tasteless energy agents. Lu Xi observed Jiang Pingji and noticed that she habitually squinted her eyes when she ate. She looked like a well-fed cat. He secretly noted down her preferences, so that he could ask the cook to make more of them in the future. Cousin, you still have the 2 wild children in the backyard? After Jiang Pingji left, Madame Hu followed Lu Xi into the main yard and sat down lazily at the table where Lu Xi practiced calligraphy. What wild children? Where did you learn to talk like that? Lu Xi frowned. Madame Hu was so lazy that the veins on her forehead were throbbing. His headache, which he had not felt for years, was back. Sit properly. Don't sway. Heh, I'm glad you didn't call them wild children. Madame Hu rested her chin on one hand and said before Lu Xi could lose his temper, Lanting doesn't know anything. Even though they are only brothers and sisters, they are related to her by blood, aren't they? If one day she feels that she has too few brothers and wants to get close to them, you won't be able to stop her. Lu Xi's eyes were still half closed as if he did not take Madame Hu's words to heart. However, Madame Hu's sharp eyes noticed that Lu Xi's holding the brush was a little unsteady. It was only for a short moment, and if she was not familiar with Lu Xi's habits and temperament, it would have been difficult to notice. Love go little sake net Lu Xi raised his eyelids and said coldly, that girl is very smart. Madame Hu finally sat up straight and said in agreement, that's true. He seems to have changed into a different person. She used to be as obedient as a sheep. If it weren't for the help of the East Courtyard, even a servant would be able to control her. Now she's like a tiger cub who only eats humans. Lu Xi was silent for a while and echoed, like father, like daughter. Just like me. Madame Hu rolled her eyes in an ungraceful manner. I should say that he's more like you after you turned 12. Lu Xi was speechless. She tried to undermine him without a word and even dug up his dark history. Did she think that he could not see the ridicule in her eyes? The people of the older generation in Hejian County all knew that Lu Shi was as stupid as he could be when he was young. Not only was he stupid, but he was also very bad. He was clearly the second son of the first wife, but he had courted death so much that even the servants didn't like him. Whenever he was mentioned, they would look down on him. However, he had good eyesight. When he was 4 or 5 years old, he had his eyes on the legitimate wife's daughter of the Gu clan in Langia County. Taking advantage of his young age, he managed to become her childhood sweetheart. In terms of family background, the two families were well matched. Of course, that was the extent of it. Gu Min had been famous for her talent since she was young. She was beautiful and intelligent. She was a good helper in the household. When she was 6 years old, she could manage the household with the first lady. She could clean up any mess. On the other hand, Lu Shi was like mud that could not hold up a wall. He was simply a reckless prodigal. To put it bluntly, when the two of them were put together, it was like a toad wanting to eat swan meat. Lu Shi shamelessly stuck to the little girl. If they were not less than 7 years old, there might have been some gossip. Later, when Gu Min reached the age of marriage, Lu Shi begged his mother to sound her out. Then reality slapped him hard in the face. Not to mention Lu Shi, a spoiled brat. Even when the Xia kingdom was not destroyed, Gu Min would have been qualified to be the empress of the country. The spoiled brat Lu Shi only started to work hard after his marriage proposal was dealt a blow. He even ran to the Gu residence to seek an audience despite the heavy rain. He waited in the rain for an entire night and begged Gu Min to postpone the engagement for 2 years. He endured a high fever and made bold statements. It's the standard sweet ancient saying, childhood sweetheart route, adorable loyal dog, pretty girl, and so on, */w***. After that, Hejian County lost a spoiled brat and gained a quiet, black-hearted scholar, Lu Shi, who studied with all his might. As they were talking, the old housekeeper came to see them. Lu Shi remembered something important and quickly asked Madame Hu to sit up straight. Come in. The old housekeeper came over to report Jiang Pingji's schedule for the day. At first, everything was fine. Lu Shi's expression changed slightly, but overall, it was a father's praise for his child. But when Jiang Pingji lifted Su Xiaoyu's chin with her folding fan, he was silent. Suku? The one who was branded and has a tattoo on his face. Is he Su Xiaoyu from Zisong County? Lu Shi asked uncertainly. The old housekeeper was confused. He had only said that the boy was called Suku. He did not mention his courtesy name or his background. How did the master know? Yes, the second Lang Jun took the slave contract alone. He was even sure that the boy would try to escape in the middle of the night. Lu Shi snorted. He's fickle and rebellious. How can you raise such a person? Flanting said that he would escape in the middle of the night. He would definitely escape. There aren't many guards at the farm. If the guards are lax at night, he might really be able to escape. The old housekeeper did not understand his master. He asked hesitantly, then, Master, in your opinion, if Su Xiaoyu really escaped in the middle of the night, he would be an escaped slave. If he was caught, he could be killed immediately. In any case, Lanting spent a lot of money to buy it. How could you let it escape? Lu Shi had given Jiang Pingji a very limited amount of money to test her. If she spent it extravagantly, the servants she bought would probably be left with nothing to eat. At this point, Lu Shi suddenly revealed a smile that was very familiar to everyone. It made them shudder when they saw it. Every time he wanted to scheme against someone and make them unlucky, he would always smile like this. Over time, it scared people to the point that they developed a phobia. Send another team to guard the farm. If he escapes, break one of his legs. It will take him 100 days to recover. Let him stay put. The old housekeeper was a little surprised. An escaped slave did not need to be killed? Since when was his master so easy to talk to? The old housekeeper was about to leave when Lu Shi suddenly changed his mind. Lu Shi's changed order made the old housekeeper even more confused. Forget it. I'll go see Su Xiaoyu myself. As for Lanting, just let her know. There's no need to hide it from her. Madame Hu frowned and asked, What's Su Xiaoyu's background? Lu Shi smiled coldly. He's a wolf that bites and can't be tamed. Such a bad evaluation. Madame Hu looked down. Can't be tamed? But at least he can bite. He's better than a dog that only knows how to bark. Lu Shi understood that there was a hidden meaning in her words, but he did not respond. Madame Hu waited patiently for a while. Finally, she snorted, stood up and left. The room was silent. Lucy sighed and muttered, "Minus spoils him, but his temper is still so bad." Chapter 59. In the farm outside the city. Suku and other people who were bought were placed in 3 long rooms. Everyone could get a new thin quilt. It was still a chilly spring. The night was cold and the wind was strong. If they didn't cover themselves with quilts, they would definitely be cold. The 2 old women who did rough work were arranged in a separate room. The older ones were already numb. They quietly hugged their blankets and lay down on their beds, stiffly like corpses. Suku, who was young and vigorous, couldn't easily accept his fate. He grabbed the thin quilt with both hands and his eyes were inexplicably gloomy. The teenager in the bed next to him turned around and found that Suku was still sitting on the bed. He couldn't help but sigh softly. "Brother Su, why aren't you sleeping now? Tomorrow I don't know what the master wants us to do. Why don't you sleep early?" Before he finished speaking, Suku interrupted him with a hoarse voice and said, "You sleep first. I was very sick a while ago, so I slept a lot. Now I don't feel sleepy. If I disturb your rest, I will go out to enjoy the wind for a while. You sleep first." After that, Suku lifted the thin quilt, tightened his thin lips and opened the door quietly. He saw the dark sky outside. There was no other sound except for the faint snoring coming from the door and the wind outside. Suku saw that and couldn't help licking his molars with the tip of his tongue. A plan that had been put on hold came to his mind again. If he didn't leave now, when the people in the room behind him were tamed by the Lus, there would be no chance for him to escape. Since he was lucky to be taken out of the death row, Suku had been thinking about regaining his freedom all the time. However, he became a slave and fell into the hands of the broker house. He could only choose to endure and stay dormant. It was not easy for him to figure out the law of the patrol guards in the broker house. He even made other preparations to escape tonight, but he didn't expect to run into Jiang Pingji. However, it seemed that there was nothing wrong with it. The broker house was very strict with the goods. Basically, they patrolled twice in a quarter of an hour. There were strong thugs both inside and outside. Although he knew some martial arts, he was a weak scholar after all. Not to mention that he was sick now. If he was accidentally discovered and caught, he would definitely be beaten to death. On the other hand, the security of this farm was lax. Basically, no one cared about the slaves they bought. If he sneaked out of the farm at night, he would be safe as long as he entered the nearby woods. Then he could escape to the mountains to hide for 2 days. Maybe he would be free. This thought lingered in his mind. Suku swallowed nervously. Because of the fever, his throat was so dry that smoke could come out. He shook his dizzy head, trying to keep himself awake. In his mind, he recalled the route he saw when he was pulled by the mule cart. "If the heavens don't kill me, I will definitely take revenge." Suku was very cautious. He crept out of the farm while hiding in the shadows. The farm behind him was like a sleeping, man-eating beast. It curled up and slept. It looked harmless, but it had the ability to suck people's souls and cut off their freedom. His footsteps staggered as he groped his way into the small forest. Another mile ahead was the deep forest and tall mountains. It would take at least 4 hours for the people of the farm to find out that he had escaped. He still had plenty of time. However, Suku's heart that was about to return to freedom didn't last long. His 2 handsome eyebrows gradually furrowed because of doubts. There was a kind of uneasiness in his heart. Suku walked for another quarter of an hour and his heart gradually sank to the bottom. The night wind whistled and hit his face. It was bone-chilling, but it was still not as cold as his heart at this time. The huge gap between the heaven of freedom and the hell of reality when he was about to touch it made his hands and feet feel cold. A group of 12 people, all tall and strong, all dressed in neat leather armor, riding tall horses, were looking at him silently. Suku stared at them blankly and they also stared at him blankly. At this time, silence was better than words. Finally, the crisp sound of horse hooves broke the silence. Someone came up and asked him, "Su Xiaoyu?" At first, Suku thought that he was lucky. Although he was an escaped slave, not everyone wanted to kill an escaped slave. Now, was it too late for him to go back to take a bath and sleep? These people were obviously coming for him, so Suku did not hold any hope of getting lucky. Instead, he felt a sense of pride that came from nowhere. He raised his hand to straighten his clothes, cupped his hands and said, "Yes, I am Su Xiaoyu from Zisong County." "Su Xiaoyu?" My master wants to see you. He has been waiting for you for most of the night. Suku was suspicious, but the man obviously didn't want to say more. He just asked Suku to follow him as if he wanted to take him to see someone. Even if he wanted to escape, he had to think about it. He was a man with 2 legs. Even if he was sick, he couldn't outrun a 4-legged horse. There were many farms and villages of different sizes outside Hejian County. Not long after following this group of strange people, he saw a little candlelight in front of him from a distance. He could vaguely see the shape of a village. Suku frowned and pursed his thin lips tightly. His eyes were gloomy. The leader got off the horse and threw the reins to his companion. He said to Suku, whose face was pale and lips were blue, "Master is waiting for you in the house. Go in. Don't forget to be polite." Suku was still confused. He pushed the door open and the hot air in the house blew into his face. There was also a little fragrance in the air. The fragrance made Suku subconsciously think of the handsome young man in the daytime, the son of a rich family who bought him. Is it him? Suku was hesitant, but he immediately denied the speculation when he saw the figure on the screen. The figure was obviously an adult man, and the young man in the daytime was at most 12 or 13 years old. "Come in." The man's slightly hoarse and mature voice came from the house, which shocked Suku out of his thoughts. Kneeling in front of the screen, Suku's eyes flashed with unknown colors. After a few breaths, he heard the rustling of clothes on the other side of the screen, and then he heard the sound of steady footsteps. The source of the fragrance was getting closer and closer to him. "Suku? Su Xiaoyu?" A familiar force came from his chin, but it was different from Jiang Pingji's folding fan. The man directly pinched it with his hand, and the force was so strong that he could not help but secretly gasp. It was so painful that even the corners of his eyes were filled with physiological tears, and his eyes were full of red veins. At that moment, Suku saw the face of the man in front of him clearly. Against the burning candlelight in the room, the man's face fell into his eyes. The man's eyes seemed to be dipped in poison and cold. From the outline of the face, it was somewhat similar to the young man in the daytime. As long as one was not blind, anyone could see that the two were related by blood. Suku was puzzled. He was just a slave bought by the young man. Why did the young man's family come out? He answered with some difficulty, "Yes, I am." For no reason, Suku's brain seemed to be empty when he was stared at by those venomous eyes. His heart was filled with an indescribable fear, and he didn't even feel the pain of his chin being pinched to the point where it was bruised. Chapter 60. After a good night's sleep, Takshu and Xuanmei helped Jiang Pingji dress and wash up. Second Langjun, the old housekeeper, sent a message last night saying that a servant escaped from the farm and was later caught. Takshu straightened her collar and then tied up her long hair. She fixed it with a simple but exquisite jade hairpin. Clothes and appearances in ancient times were complicated and particular. Jiang Pingji only knew how to tie her hair into a ponytail. She allowed the 2 personal maids to do whatever they wanted. She raised her half-closed eyelids and asked, "Escaped slave? Suku? That seems to be the name. Now he is waiting for you outside the yard." Xuanmei echoed. She then criticized, "Second Langjun is gentle to his servants, unlike the other young masters. Langjun, you took him in. What else could he be unhappy about? How dare he want to be a runaway slave?" Jiang Pingji listened quietly and didn't say a word. In fact, she admired Suku's actions. People who fought for their own freedom were courageous. However, in this era, her thoughts and Suku's actions were very rebellious. Suku was not worthy of being treated like a fool, so she just listened. Jiang Pingji switched on the live stream as usual. She resumed her elegant appearance and ate her breakfast quietly. Of course, due to the lack of resources in this era, her breakfast was average in the eyes of the audience. Outside the study, she saw Suku, who had changed into a clean set of clothes. Even the wound on his face had been properly bandaged. Jiang Pingji walked to Suku's side. "Why are you here? Master has ordered me to learn from you in the future and serve you." Suku's body trembled. He sounded unwilling, but his attitude was still respectful. It was completely different from the day before. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and rolled her eyes. Suddenly, she thought of something and her lips curled into a smile. Because of her identity, Lu Lanting did not have a page boy. Takshu and Xuanmei were the ones who helped her with the chores. Now that Suku was half a page boy, he had to take care of the chores. Entering the study, rows upon rows of bookshelves were piled with countless bamboo slips, as well as incomparably precious paper books. Suku glanced at the labels on each row of bookshelves and the titles indicated. He was so stunned that he forgot where he was. Just this study room alone was several times larger than an ordinary household. The books on the shelves were even more priceless. If one were to say that he was dissatisfied before, after reading these books he was no longer angry. In fact, he was so excited that his hands were trembling. What happened? Jiang Pingji glanced at Suku and sat down. She pointed at the box beside the desk and said, "Cut the paper." The bamboo paper produced by the papermaking workshop was very big. Jiang Pingji cut it into a suitable size according to the requirements. The paper she had cut before was used to practice calligraphy and complete homework. It was the size of A4, but it was too small for drawing design, so she had to cut it again. To do Feiqiu, early in the morning I've been given candy by the streamer. Although the gender is reversed, it's still pleasing to the eye. Laogong bougie hubby. Isn't this the stubborn young man from yesterday? Jiang Pingji seemed to be practicing calligraphy, but in fact she was watching the bullet screen of the live stream. The screen was full of old drivers. Badao Zhangzi, did something unspeakable happen last night? Why does it feel like the wolf cub has become a little lamb after one night? What did you do to the cub last night? Jiang Pingji secretly clicked her tongue. What did she do to the cub? It was obvious that someone had gone to train the wolf. Sorcerer girl offing. I haven't been here for 2 days and the streamer has already started to build a harem? Misha warrior on. The audience is confused, but Suku is obedient, and his style is as beautiful as a painting. The comments were getting more and more twisted. Some people even tipped her, hoping that she could make a live version of how to flirt with a man. Her eyebrows were jumping happily. Suku, who was beside her, had no idea of Jiang Pingji's rich inner thoughts. His pale hands were placed on the bamboo paper, and the smooth feeling under his palms made his cheeks flush. It was as if he was touching the soft skin of a young girl. The frequency of his heartbeat made him feel helpless. Was this bamboo paper? When Suku was studying with the headmaster in Zisong County, he had seen the face of it. It was a stunning sight that made his heart beat erratically. As a commoner, Suku was lucky enough to study. How could he have the chance to use bamboo paper which was as expensive as gold? Not to mention, the quality of the bamboo paper he had seen before could not be compared to the box of bamboo paper in front of him. If the former was said to be as loose as a middle-aged woman's skin, the latter was as white and smooth as a newborn baby's. It was addictive to touch. Jiang Pingji, did she make a mistake? Why did she feel like she had brought back an idiot with a fetish? Actually, she didn't intend to let Suku stay by her side. She just wanted to buy him and promote him to be in charge of the accounts. He would be mainly in charge of the group of servants she trained, from trivial matters to the training process and rewards and punishments. He had to take care of everything. They were the embryonic form of her second novel, and they were also her guinea pigs. It was inevitable that she would pay attention to them. Even though she had been the commander of the 7th Army, this era was too different from hers. There were many things that she had to explore. The light in Suku's eyes was exactly what she admired. But it seemed that her father, who was obsessed with women, had misunderstood. Because of the crazy work in the past few years, Luxi's life was quite irregular. That day he slept until noon. Jiang Pingji went to greet him and had lunch with him. She observed carefully and found that Luxi's eyes were darker. She knew it clearly, but she still opened her mouth to ask, "Father, did you sleep well last night?" Luxi smiled and took a sip of tea to moisten his lips. "I went to train the wolves." Jiang Pingji, white lotuses were all the same, but there were always two sides to a two-faced person. That was true. Jiang Pingji silently turned her face away. Jiang Pingji thought without sympathy Suku would probably be traumatized for the rest of his life. Then she thought of something else and felt that she had to explain it to Luxi. She thought that Luxi might have misunderstood and thought that she was attracted to Suku's beauty. "Father, Suku is a man after all. It's not appropriate for him to stay by my side." Jiang Pingji was a girl now. Suku and Feng Jin were not blind. If they were not careful, they would be exposed. Luxi said, After all, I bought him with real money. I'll keep him as a page boy for now. If he doesn't work, then I'll send him away. Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes. Was there a hidden meaning in Lu Shi's words? I want him to be in charge of the training of the servants. He can also be an accountant. Lu Shi looked up at her and frowned slightly. Then he said indifferently, it's up to you. Chapter 61. To provide you with wonderful novels to read. Life in ancient times was actually quite boring. If Lu Shi hadn't given Jiang Pingji such a test, she would have been bored to death. In such a state of idleness, she began to particularly miss the days when she had to put her head on a belt. The system despised her. I thought the host would regain the skills from your previous life and become a Vajra Barbie or something, Jiang Pingji said matter-of-factly. This body is too weak to withstand that level of training, and it will make people around me suspicious. I have a thorough plan and I need a reasonable time. Now is not the time. How could she forget the incident with the bandits in Hejian County? She didn't want to try the feeling of powerlessness a second time. But she also knew that the genes of this body were not good enough and the overall quality was also not good enough. Under such circumstances, no matter how much she trained, it would only slightly increase her strength. The effort and the gain were completely disproportionate. She would only do that if she was out of her mind. There was obviously a safer way, so of course she wouldn't choose the one that was far away. Moreover, even now there are not many people who can defeat me, right? Most people who saw her would think that she was a thin young man. With her age and figure, how much damage could she do? In fact, her strength was higher than that of a strong adult man. Coupled with her rich combat experience, she was simply a human-shaped killing machine. Her current life was stable and her strength was enough to protect herself. As for the rest, she already had a plan in her mind. The system snorted. It's so boring to follow a host like you. It feels like there's no use at all. It was a system that broadcast palace intrigue. All kinds of beauties fighting and scheming against each other were the mainstream. How could it be like Jiang Pingji? Your useless trash system. Jiang Pingji mercilessly attacked it, but there was always a smile at the corner of her mouth. The system coldly dragged out its voice and fiercely typed 4 words. Blue skinny mushroom cack. Jiang Pingji. In the eyes of an outsider, Jiang Pingji was sitting in the corridor leaning against the table. She supported her chin with one hand and held a scroll with the other. She always had a gentle smile at the corner of her mouth, and her eyes were charming. The spring breeze blew her hair and the pear blossoms in the courtyard swayed with it. Seeing this, Su Ku, who was guarding at the side, secretly turned his head, feeling a little surprised. If this Lang Jun was less heroic, he would be as pretty as a girl. Of course, it was just a likeness. Anyway, Su Ku couldn't imagine a girl with such a black heart and such a vile character. It was simply a nightmare. Even though he was unhappy, Su Ku didn't dare to show it. In his eyes, Jiang Pingji wasn't scary. What was scary was his father, who was above her. Even though it had been 2 or 3 days, he still felt a chill in his body every night. Once he fell asleep, the room would be pitch black and he would think of that pair of eyes that seemed to be dipped in poison, scaring him so much that he wanted to have nightmares. Of course, the truth would prove how silly he was. At most, Lu Shi would torture people, but she would make them wish they were dead. What happened, Takshu? Jiang Pingji turned her head and looked at the corner of the corridor. Su Ku, who was closest to her, did not react at all. The maidservant, Takshu, respectfully handed over an invitation card. She took it and a delicate fragrance came from the letter. It smelled very good. An assembly? There were 2 cards in total. One was written and the other was tucked inside. The handwriting was gentle and graceful, and it was very pleasing to the eye. It was Wei Jingxian's handwriting. I'm not interested in that. She was proficient in fighting and surviving in the wild, but she had no idea how to recite poetry. As a science monk who loved machinery, she was considered illiterate. Her motto was, "If you're not convinced, come fight me." That was how hooligan she was. Even the former Lu Lanting was bad at poetry. She was often praised by the previous teachers as the work of a craftsman. Takshu was stunned. She didn't expect Jiang Pingji to reject her. She stood rooted to the ground. Xuanmei added awkwardly, "But it's a personal invitation from Wei Nyangzi. If I reject it, I'm afraid." Wei Jingxian was his fiancée in name. What was the difference between rejecting a personal invitation and a slap in the face? Jiang Pingji read Xuanmei's unfinished words and helplessly looked up at the sky in the courtyard. The sky was clear and it was the perfect weather to go out. Suku frowned and asked in a low voice, "This is a gathering, not a feud. How can it be the world's invitation?" Usually, invitations were sent a few days in advance to give the invitees enough time to prepare. This invitation was sent in the afternoon. Jiang Pingji said carelessly, "You're a young lady. Men can't understand your temper. You have to tolerate it." After that incident, she had offended more than half of the noble ladies in Hejian County. It was normal for her to be bullied. Suku was speechless. She made it sound like he had no bearing. Jiang Pingji played with the sandalwood fan in her hand. She ordered the maids to prepare suitable clothes. She was ready to leave for the gathering. "This weather is actually more suitable for sleeping," Jiang Pingji said to the audience. Jiang Pingji said to the audience, "Sleepy in spring, sleepy in autumn, sleepy in summer and sleepless in winter and March. It's a good time to sleep all year round. I'd be crazy to waste it on a boring poetry meeting." Jiang Pingji always had a lazy look on her face. She leaned against the table and looked like a sleeping beauty. The gathering was held by the ways at the Ishui River outside the city. It would take about an hour for the carriage to get there. Apart from the driver, Jiang Pingji only brought a maid and Suku, who was not very good at fighting. Jiang Pingji brought Suku with her for a reason. His father Lu Shi seemed to care a lot about Suku. He even tested him on his studies. His attitude was more like a student than a servant. According to the rules of that era, it was a bit whimsical. Suku not only had a criminal record, but he was also a slave who had been branded. His social status was lower than that of a commoner. No matter how talented he was, he would not be valued by someone like Lu Shi. But, thinking about Lu Shi's unconventional and open style, she was not sure what he was thinking. Putting Lu Shi aside, she had been observing Suku for the past few days. Indeed, she was tempted. Of course, it had nothing to do with romantic feelings. She simply felt that if he was trained well, he might be a good assistant. Suku was a standard talent for internal affairs. He was quick-witted and resourceful. If it was in her world, he might be recruited as an assistant in the army and help her deal with all kinds of messy documents. But no. His temperament was a bit uncertain. He needed to be trained. She would keep him for now. If it was possible, she would use him. As she thought about it, they arrived at the gathering. From afar, they could see a circle of servants and carriages. Once bitten, twice shy. It seems that he was frightened by what happened before. Seeing the formation, Jiang Pingji got out of the carriage. Her wooden clogs clattered on the stones. Chapter 62. The third month of late spring was the season when the grass was long and the orioles were in flight. The willows were green and the flowers were in full bloom. The sky was as blue as if it had been washed. Silhouettes flashed by the pavilion. Young maidservants quickly carried fresh seasonal fruits. Pear blossoms were in full bloom nearby. The scenery was beautiful, but the people were even more beautiful. More than 10 young Langjuns were sitting at the table with exquisite snacks and fruits on the table in front of them. The oldest was in his 20s, while the youngest was only a little over 10 years old. Their ages varied, but they were all extremely good-looking. Jiang Pingji looked at the screams on the bullet screen. She secretly rolled her eyes. She didn't understand the aesthetics of those people. Although these Langjuns were beautiful, they were all dressed in brightly colored clothes with flowers on their hairpins and powder on their faces. They were really more beautiful than flowers. Cough, cough, cough. To put it bluntly, it was a gathering of a bunch of traps. Faced with Jiang Pingji's ridicule, the audience on the bullet screen was not happy. A series of blocked her vision. Everyone had their own aesthetic standards. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Receive? All right, she surrendered. Other than these decent Langjuns, there were a few noble ladies sitting on the other side of a translucent landscape screen. At a glance, more than half of them were acquaintances. Not long ago they had just experienced an exciting adventure, and now they were in the mood to participate in the scholarly gathering. These young ladies were really bold. When Jiang Pingji saw them, the noble ladies naturally saw her too. Among them, Shang Wanwan's eyes lit up. She wanted to step forward, but they were in a public place. Everyone thought that Jiang Pingji was a man and Wei Jingxian's fiancé. If she was too attentive, she might be misunderstood as having feelings for Sister Lanting. As he thought of this, he froze in his action of getting up. Annoyed, he sat back down, feeling listless. Jiang Pingji did not sit with the noble ladies. Instead, she found a seat among the Langjuns. Su Ku and Takshu, the maid, sat on either side of her. She was a little late. The assembly had already begun a quarter of an hour ago. Everyone was very dissatisfied with her behavior of not even apologizing. However, they did not say it out loud and only silently expressed their disregard. Jiang Pingji did not care at all. She picked a fruit that was soaked in the well water and threw it into her mouth. A refreshing coolness spread throughout her body. Going against a few embroidered flowers and plants while reciting poems? That would be a waste of time. He might as well eat, drink, and take a nap when he was tired. She was relaxed, but the audience was anxious. They were still waiting for Jiang Pingji to amaze the world with a brilliant feat and slap their faces. You're just going to change places to eat, drink, and then take an afternoon nap when you're participating in the poetry meet? Host, you're such a disgrace to the transmigrated woman. Host V. When I was in school, my grades in liberal arts were pretty low. Please don't make things difficult for me. Even the archaeologists of my era might not be able to understand the ancient sayings of ancient times. Other than training, I usually fight. I'm a martial artist. The audience was dumbfounded. This was different from the script. Lan Chue Yubuja. It's okay, host. We'll be your support. Baidu and Daddy Gu will help you. Sorceress Ah Feng. Left hand is the Tang dynasty's third wave. Right hand is the Song dynasty's Yuan Chu. Above you have Li Bai's support. Below you have Du Gong's support. Host, you're a great person standing on the shoulders of the giants of poetry and literature. Even if they're dwarves, you can beat them in seconds. You were just licking the screen half a minute ago and now you're turning against me after licking the screen? Jiang Pingji was speechless as she read the comments. Turning against them was as easy as flipping a book. Misha Warrior Ah Yuan. My mouse is already on the Baidu search interface. I'll search for all the poems you want. Jiang Pingji began to reflect upon herself as she looked at the audience who were not afraid of making things worse. Had she been too quiet these past few days? How could she make the audience forget about her previous brutality? Host V. As the saying goes, there's no first in literature and no second in martial arts. One poem can't win them over. If you cheat, you'll be exposed in minutes. Even if you make an amazing poem, they won't let it go. What should I do next? Moreover, the mainstream of this era was not about quatrains or songs. It was useless to copy them mechanically. Perhaps in other eras, being exposed for plagiarism or impersonation was not a big deal. But in this era where literature prevailed, it was tantamount to seeking death. It would also implicate the whole clan. Even if one was from a noble family, once such a thing happened, one's entire life would be ruined. Since it was so clear, the audience who had been following the stream for the past few days became much more clear-headed and stopped making a fuss. It was so boring without a poem segment. They'd better continue licking the screen in silence. Jiang Pingji did not have the time to celebrate the rare moment of peace. She heard someone call her name and subconsciously turned her head to look. What's the matter? The other party choked. Anyone who was not blind could see how absent-minded Jiang Pingji was just now. Due to the chaos of the 16 kingdoms and the unification of the Xia kingdom, women were not restricted to the boudoir. Even now, the 5 kingdoms were divided into Xia, and the social atmosphere was biased towards men's rights. Women were slowly restrained by various rules, but for now it was not too strict. A gathering like this was basically equivalent to a blind date for young men and women of the right age. These Langjuns, even if they were not interested in the noble lady next door, still wanted to show their best side, like a peacock spreading its tail. Just when they were trying their best to show off their talents, a traitor appeared in the middle of the crowd. She looked like she was not interested. Wasn't she looking for trouble? When the Longjuan's face was about to turn red, the audience who were watching the gathering reminded Jiang Pingji on the bullet screen. She then looked slow and said, "I'm not good at poetry. I'm afraid I'm going to spoil everyone's mood." She rejected me so directly? The atmosphere was slightly awkward. At that moment, a clear voice came from the side, like pearls falling on a jade plate. There was a hint of a smile in the voice. Lanting is really mischievous. If it wasn't for the gathering, it would be extremely difficult to see you. Feng Jin walked out from under the pear tree. His skin was like snow, his face was like jade, and his eyes were like dots of paint. His phoenix eyes were long and narrow, and the ends of his eyes were slightly raised. He was not old, but his charm was already beginning to form. Compared to Feng Jin's charm, which attracted the attention of the people when he appeared, Jiang Pingji's performance was too uncooperative. Why are you still in Hejin County? Everyone was speechless. She just came to the gathering and you want to kick her out of Hejin County with just one sentence? Feng Jin did not show any anger towards Jiang Pingji's disdain. Instead, he asked the servant to place a seat next to her. He joked, Lanting's heartless words are really hurtful. Jiang Pingji snorted. Before saying those words, first clean up the perfume on your body. Let me give you a word of advice. You're young and refined. Feng Jin was stunned for a moment. He understood the meaning behind her words. His pale cheeks suddenly turned red and he almost lost his composure. Chapter 63. Young and refined. Lan Cui Yu Buja. Hey young man, young and refined. Masturbation is bad for your health. Badeo Zhangzi. What do you mean by young and refined? I don't understand anything. Tudu Feiqiu. Hey, I'm so embarrassed that I'm turning yellow. Feng Jin blushed and said in a low voice, Lanting, don't slander me. When did I ever do such a thing? Jiang Pingji looked down on him even more. If you don't do such a thing, do you want to see a famous doctor? Feng Jin was speechless. Was this the legendary yellow mud that fell into one's pants? Even if it wasn't shit, it was still shit? Who said one had to look for girls in a brothel? Couldn't he just listen to the music and watch the beauties dance? It seemed like nothing good ever happened when he saw Jiang Pingji. Feng Jin took a sip of tea to calm himself down. At that moment he noticed Su Ku, who was sitting behind Jiang Pingji, and asked, This is? Jiang Pingji said, My new page boy. He's arrogant but he has some skills. Maybe he'll be of great use in the future. Feng Jin was surprised. I can't believe I heard such high praise from Lanting. He must be extraordinary. He had seen Jiang Pingji's mouth, but he didn't know how her eyes worked. It seemed that no one could hide from her. Su Ku was valued by her, which meant that he wasn't weak. That made the young and energetic boy want to compete with him. Love Gok small talk net ku. For a moment Feng Jin had forgotten something important. Lu Lanting was a girl. Jiang Pingji glanced at him and said as she ate her tea, No matter how extraordinary he is, he's still my accountant. To be honest, the tea in this era was very different from the tea she had imagined. There were many spices added to it and the taste was hard to describe. Strangely enough, the more she drank, the more she got used to the taste. It was terrifying. Lanting, you don't play with words? Feng Jin smiled and nodded at the Langjuns. He whispered to her. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. It has never been my style to attack the enemy's strong points with my weak points. Feng Jin thought about what she was good at and silently facepalmed. She shouldn't have come to a place like this, okay? There are also activities like horse riding and archery at the assembly. You can show your skills there. Feng Jin comforted her. Even he who was in Shangyang had heard of Lu Shi, the gifted scholar of Hejin County. Lu Lanting, as his son, was illiterate and had no knowledge of poetry. This was completely unexpected. However, everyone had their own strengths and weaknesses. Just because the father was brilliant did not mean that the child had to be a master of the literary world. Oh. Jiang Pingji glanced at the Langjuns, who looked like peacocks spreading their feathers, and laughed disdainfully. I heard that in spring the male animals like to show off their strong bodies and extraordinary abilities to the females. With their abilities they can play the guqin, sing and recite some poems that make them feel sour, but it's too much for them to ride a horse, shoot an arrow or throw a pot and so on. Love go little say net ka. Feng Jin was speechless. He should not have talked about this topic. If they continued, he was afraid that he would not be able to leave the assembly alive. He would be beaten to death. Feng Jin cleverly changed the topic to prevent Jiang Pingji from saying something more provocative. Why is Lanting here at the assembly today? It was different from the usual poetry and literature gatherings. Today's assembly was more of a blind date. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows at the landscape screen and said in a warm tone, "Jing'er is here too." If it had been someone else, they would have thought that Jiang Pingji missed her fiancé and took the opportunity to come to the assembly to relieve the pain of longing. However, Feng Jin was not an ordinary person. He and Jiang Pingji had not known each other for long, but the few times they had interacted, they were as familiar as old friends. Feng Jin frowned and asked in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Does the Weiss want to break off the engagement? Why have you forgotten?" Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and her eyes were filled with ridicule. "This marriage is not going to last. Jing'er is at the age to discuss marriage and should get married after the wedding ceremony. There are not many Langjuns of the right age in Hejian County. Shouldn't we make plans early?" In ancient times, marriages were all set early. They waited until they were of a certain age to find someone they liked. When Feng Jin asked this, his expression changed. He seemed to have been tricked by himself. "You don't feel unhappy at all?" Jiang Pingji responded by rolling her eyes in annoyance. Feng Jin was speechless. Oh, the person in front of him was a girl, but he could not help but think of her as a brother. "Since you already know the purpose of this gathering, Lanting should not have come. Even if she was only a fake husband on the surface, the Wei residents' actions were still giving her a green hat, okay?" Jiang Pingji said, "Do you think I can ignore the sun outside just because I covered myself with the blanket and slept in? Moreover, I really like Jing. A good girl like her should have a good husband. I came to see what kind of a Langjun the Weiss are interested in and help Jing or judge him." No matter what the Weiss were like, Wei Jingxian was indeed innocent. Under the circumstances where there was no conflict, love for beautiful women was above everything else. "Then what did you see?" Feng Jin did not like to gossip behind people's backs, but he was saying it in front of them. Jiang Pingji was not Feng Jin. She had no qualms. While she was drinking tea, she looked at one person. A real idiot. The fragrant powder on him came from different maids. There are probably 3 of them. One of the maids is pregnant. She's around 5 months pregnant. Feng Jin could listen carefully at first, but after a while he felt that his worldview was broken. This one is even worse. He is lusting after his brother's wife. I guess he had many romantic dreams last night. That one likes men and is cold to women. If she marries him, she will probably be a widow. Jiang Pingji gossiped with Feng Jin in a low voice. As for the one in pink with flowers on his hairpin, he is addicted to sex and has a tendency to abuse women. Gee, what a beautiful face, but he is filthy on the inside. Whoever marries him will be unlucky. As for the one in green, he is considered loyal, but sometimes he is a little muddle-headed. He is usually too cautious and can only be considered average. His widowed mother is strong. I am afraid that the bride will be tortured if she marries him. He is not a good choice." As he spoke, another youth dressed in a bluestone-colored robe walked in from outside. His grace was not inferior to Feng Jin, who was beside him. Feng Jin suddenly laughed. "Lanting, look at that one. What does he look like?" "At first glance he looks all right. Unfortunately, he is not a good man." Chapter 64. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Feng Jin's eyes lit up. He continued to ask, "Apart from these, is there anything else?" Jiang Pingji sneered. "He came from the same brothel as you. How could you not know? He was hugging left and right and one of them was feeding him snacks in his arms. What a carefree life. To put it bluntly, we fought for a few rounds. We had to wash up before we rushed over." Feng Jin's pale face turned red again. He felt even more awkward and uncomfortable than before. Why did he hate Lu Lanting so much? He knew Lu Lanting was ruthless, but he still wanted to be bullied. Jiang Pingji glanced at the Langjuns who were still chatting and talking about poetry. No matter how beautiful they were just a pile of weak bones in her eyes. They were so weak that it was disgusting. Jiang Pingji threw the teacup on the floor. "Boring. Takshusuku, follow me." She stood up and walked past Wumajun. She did not see the awkward expression on his face. From afar, Wumajun had seen Feng Jin chatting happily with a handsome young Langjun. He wanted to come over and talk, but he did not expect Feng Jin to stand up and leave with a cold face. The change in attitude was so drastic that the suspicious Wuma Jun could not help but overthink. Feng Jin smiled and shook his head. He was helping Jiang Pingji out. Lanting is not good at poetry. Looks like he's annoyed. Wuma Jun sat down. The unhappiness in his heart dissipated a little, but he still minded. Who is that Lang Jun? He had left the others behind and went to the noble lady. They seemed to be chatting happily. Wuma Jun felt that such a person would not amount to much. Feng Jin smiled and introduced him as if he did not see the dissatisfaction in Wuma Jun's eyes. Lu Zhongqing, the second Lang Jun of Lu County chief's family. In all of Dongqing, Lu Shi from Hejin County was the only person called Lu Zhongqing who was also the county chief. Of course, the title, County Chief Lu, would have to be changed in the near future. Wuma Jun's expression was much more relaxed, and there was even a hint of enthusiasm. Although Lu Shi was not in the imperial court and his official position was not prominent, no one in the imperial court dared to ignore him. Not everyone had the ability to bring a barren county back to life and make it prosperous. That county's annual tax revenue was comparable to that of 2 states, and it was also a major grain-producing county in Dongqing. Wuma Jun was still suspicious. So it's the Lang Jun of County Chief Lu. But why did he leave just now? Lanting loves martial arts and seems to be interested in chivalry. He is very impatient with poems and songs. How could he be interested? Feng Jin was still gentle and seemed a little helpless. She's only 12 years old now. She's young and impetuous. Let her be. Wuma Jun knew Feng Jin well. Feng Jin liked to talk about things that were difficult to understand, and Lu Lanting was probably angered because of this. Thinking that he had found a reason, he finally revealed a gentle smile and said, Huayu, since Lu Langjun doesn't like to talk about those things, why don't you just change it? Why make him leave in anger? It is said that County Chief Lu loves his son as much as his own life, and he is the General Evaluation Officer this year. Aren't you afraid? There was an evaluation every 3 years. Although Lu Shi was only a county governor, his status was even comparable to that of a governor. He was specially promoted for this year's evaluation. If they offended Lu Shi at this time, they might get their heads blown off. Feng Jin said carelessly, County Chief Lu is an honest and upright person. Why would he care about the conflicts of a child's family? Which official in Dongqing's officialdom was not in cahoots with one another? Only Lu Zhongqing was a clear stream. Back then, when he was sent to Hu County, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that he had been ambushed and suffered a loss. Hu County was a large place, comparable to a prefecture. However, it was a place with barren mountains and unruly rivers. The people were tough and there were bandits and squires. There were years of floods and natural and man-made disasters. Before Lu Shi, 9 county governors had died in such a place. They had thought that Lu Shi would be the 10th unlucky one. Who would have thought that he would have the ability to turn the world upside down? Even though Hu County was still a county, it was as prosperous as the other rich prefectures in Dongqing. The food it produced had alleviated the disasters in the 2 neighboring prefectures and stabilized Dongqing's decline. Who in the court dared to say that they did not know about Lu Shi? Jiang Pingji did not know that her strange father was so cunning. She had another problem on her mind. Could anyone come here and pull Shangguan away from this sticky candy? She kept saying that Brother Lanting did not care about one, and she kept saying that Brother Lanting did not love one. She made it sound as if she had committed a heinous crime. Then what do you want? Jiang Pingji felt that she was stupid. Why did she come here? She might as well choke Feng Jin to death. Teach one her how to ride a horse. I want a big horse, not a pony. One pouted as she begged. Her braids swayed back and forth. You're so hard to please. How are you going to ride a horse with that outfit? Jiang Pingji facepalmed, but she accepted Shangguan's kindness. Despite her young age, she was a smart girl. At her age, it was still too early for her to come to this gathering, but she had come with Lu Lanting's best interests in mind. Shangguan had probably seen through the Weiss plans and was trying to get back at her in front of everyone. I knew that Brother Lanting would say that. I'm prepared. She squinted her eyes slyly as she spoke. Fine, I'll give it to her. Jiang Pingji had no choice but to turn around and ask Wei Jingxian, whose face was filled with guilt and embarrassment. Do you want to go? Wei Jingxian's exquisitely made-up face turned pale. She shook her head. Shang Guanwan walked in front. She had changed her outfit for the day to make it suitable for riding a horse. Brother Lanting, don't blame Sister Xian. She only found out about today's incident last night. Pulling Lu Lanting's horse, the two of them walked to a place where the crowd could see but not hear. Why would I blame her? The Wei residence's invitations secretly contained her flower note, and there's a code in it. Come, let's give it a try. Jiang Pingji stood on her tiptoes and stroked the horse's neck. On the surface she was trying to soothe the horse's anxiety at meeting a stranger, but in reality she was using her aura to suppress it. It had dared to kick its hooves before, but now it would not dare to throw a tantrum. Both Lu Lanting and Shang Guanwan were little children, but the horse was a pure-blooded northern borderline stallion. Its height alone was several heads taller than the two of them. But now the legendary wild horse was as obedient as a lamb. It's too high. I can't get up. Shang Guanwan tried a few times, but she could not even step into the stirrup. Her face scrunched up. Jiang Pingji did not carry her up, so she gave the horse a look and used a mental hint. Then Shang Guanwan saw that Jiang Pingji patted the horse's body, and the horse obediently lowered its body. You're so smart. Jiang Pingji smiled as she held the reins. Shang Guanwan nervously grabbed the saddle. You can get up now. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.